Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the June 22nd meeting of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen. All members are present. If you'll indulge me for a moment, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th imposed strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. Members of the public who wish to watch and listen to the meeting may do so in the following manner. WCTV Channel 9 for Comcast Xfinity users and Channel 37 for Verizon Fios users, and we're also live streaming on WCTV.org. The meeting of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance or members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to listen to the meeting while in progress may also do so via telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8656 and enter the ID 836-5670-3901. Then press pound and then press pound again at the next voice prompt. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the meeting designated for public comment. By the following steps previously noted, then press star 9 on your telephone keypad. This will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. All callers using this feature will be placed in a queue in the order they have been entered the prompt. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide real-time access, we will post a record of this meeting on our town's website as soon as we are able. And with that, would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And once again, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, as most of all of you know, this past Saturday was our annual town election. And so I want to congratulate everyone who participated. I thank for everybody who came out and voted. But I specifically want to congratulate my two colleagues that are with us this evening, Selectman Joe Mario Mahoney. Congratulations, and glad to have you back here on your re-election. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we also want to welcome to our board and congratulate Mr. Gary DePalma to the board. Gary, good evening and congratulations.
Good evening and thank you very much.
All right, and with that, we'll get right into it. Our second item on the agenda is transmitting of Treasury warrants 50, 50A, 51, and 51A. Is there a motion?
Selectman Eaton will make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Selectman Kyra will second it.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the roll call vote. Selectman Kyra?
Yes.
Selectman DePalma?
Yes.
Selectman Eaton?
Yes.
Selectman O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is a yes also, so that's unanimous. Thank you all. And we have no minutes to approve this evening, so we'll jump right into our first appointment, which is with Ms. Shelley Newhouse, our health director, and Mr. William Kavanaugh, our fire chief, in regards to our update on the COVID-19 pandemic. So good evening to both of you.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. Shelley, we'll start with you. I know you put out some good news this morning in terms of the numbers, but I'll open up for you any updates you might have for us.
We have currently one positive case in Wilmington with 0 in quarantine, which is great. We're still doing a ton of contact tracing though, which, just remember that COVID is still out there. We probably will see a little bit of a lull right now in the summer because we're seeing that across the state, but please keep practicing wearing your masks, social distancing. I know there's a lot of people at the parks. It's so important to follow the guidelines and the rules to really keep this plateau that we're in. Hopefully it just stays that way. We've been really busy reopening Massachusetts in Wilmington. So the restaurants, as many of you have seen, have outdoor seating. And today they could open up with indoor seating, but we're still encouraging outdoor seating at least through the summer so that we can keep the inside seating less. So that's been going well. Phase 3 probably won't start until July 6th. At least that's what they're shooting for, but we'll see what happens during these 2 weeks of a full phase 2 being open. So that's where we're at.
Great. Thank you very much. And I know if you stick around, we'll have some questions for you, maybe from other members, but I wanted to ask you specifically, obviously later in the meeting, we're going to be talking about getting ready for town meeting. You've been very influential in the planning for that. Do you have any message you want to tell folks as they prepare to come out and join us at the annual town meeting? Perhaps help us encourage folks to come. I know we have made every effort to make sure that's going to be a safe environment for everybody. And I didn't know if you had something you wanted to add in terms of
No, I mean, we set up, the setup's going to be for everyone's safety. Everyone will be sitting 6 feet apart. Please wear your mask when you come. Wash your hands before you leave the house to come to town meeting, and then, just it'll be fine. I wouldn't worry about going to town meeting. We have all the safety protocols there, so please come.
Great. Thank you very much. And Chief Kavanaugh, speaking of safety, I know that you are in your department, and Chief Desmond's on the line. So good evening to Chief Desmond as well. Have been making sure every effort is being made so that people will be safe on the day of. I know our public safety officials will be out in full force on that day. So Chief, good evening to you.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Any updates from you, sir?
So like Shelley said, we're seeing a lull right now in the COVID responses. The nursing homes aren't nearly at the level at which they were in the height of all of this. The membership is still on both sides practicing social distancing. We're practicing good hygiene in the vehicles and when we're on calls. We're still approaching scenes a little bit differently due to the COVID that's still currently around. Like Shelley said, it's decreased, but it's not gone. We've also put a lot of time and effort and planning into town meeting and making sure that it's as safe as possible for everybody involved, the boards and residents coming out to vote. So we hope to see everybody there on this coming Saturday. Looks like we're going to get some good weather and it won't be too hot. So hopefully we can get some business done pretty quick.
Okay, great. I appreciate that update, Chief. And Chief Desmond, I know you're on the line. Anything you want to add in terms of the COVID? I know you guys are still assisting with calls, and I can hear it on the scanner. You guys are really being cautious when you're entering homes, and I'm glad to hear both departments, police and fire, are protecting themselves. Any update you want to add there, Chief?
Right. Well, one concern of ours, obviously, is that as people get out and get larger crowds, that there was some concern that Yentile Park was getting a little too overcrowded. So I just want to, caution people to do the right thing and, just keep this good success going. We don't want to have to take a step back or close the park because people aren't doing what they should. But all in all, it's been working out fine.
Good. We're glad to hear it. I'd like to open it up for questions for the three of you, if that's okay. Starting with Mr. Kyra.
Sure. Just one quick question for Shelley, maybe. Well, Shirley, will there be masks available for those people attending the town meeting if they come without? And are you requiring people to wear masks that day?
They have to wear masks. We're still under the governor's order to wear masks. And I will have some if someone comes and they don't have any.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. Mr. De Palma.
I have nothing really. I just want to thank them all for what they've been doing for the town of Wilmington through this whole crisis.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Eaton.
Yeah, Ms. Newhouse, Chief Kavanaugh, Chief Desmond, thank you again for all the work that the three of you and your respective departments have been putting in. Past 3+ months have been very taxing on you and your staffs, but it's very much appreciated, all the work that you three have been putting in. And your departments as well. So thank you for continuing to keep us safe. I know our numbers are looking good, and now it's just a endurance challenge to make sure that we kind of keep it going. I did have a question. I don't know. I know we have discussion coming up shortly about our town meeting, but just on, I guess, a safety protocol for town meeting. Are we going to be having hand sanitizer, and I guess is there a plan for keeping the bathrooms clean?
Right. So I can take that one if you want. So like I said, we've had a lot of meetings, a lot of logistical things we're working out. So currently I got the roster today. We will be having hand sanitizer at each entrance into the meeting. We encourage everybody to bring your own mask, as there won't be enough to give to everybody if everyone shows up. The restrooms are going to be the ones in the field house. They're going to be staffed by public buildings. We also have some transportation for mobility impaired adults and children, I guess, if they show up. And we're going to be using the DPW membership to operate those, along with Terry Masiello is going to have the Elder Services van. We have additional police coming down to help out with traffic and parking. We have additional DPW helping out with parking in the cemetery, as we know there's got to be some in there. So we want to make sure that we're taking care to not damage anybody's gravestones or anything like that. And I've also put on additional personnel to keep an ambulance down there the whole time. As in the past, we typically have one person working. Because of this meeting's venue and because it's outside, we're going to keep an ambulance staffed as well. So yes, we do have plenty of safety items available for the public to come out to the meeting and have a safe time there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yeah, so my question really is just, as things have been opening up, have you had more calls that you've had to deal with of concerned, citizens or community members with either crowds or just different things that you have to deal with, even though the numbers are down? I'm assuming as things are opening up, all of you in your respective roles might have an increase in work that you're actually dealing with. And I was just curious if you've been tracking that and how that's been looking.
Yeah, it's been busy. Every person is complaining about everybody out there not wearing a mask. Can they open? Is it all right to go in here? And a lot of it's questions, is it all right to go in here? And I went in this place and the person in front of me didn't have a mask on, and I went here and I watched them make my coffee. They didn't wipe down, whatever. It's just, it's all day long. So it's unbelievable, the questions, some of them that we get. It's, and I'm one person and I try to tell them that, and don't worry, I do respond to every complaint. I do check them out, whether either it's a phone call because I know them, or the establishment, or unless I have to go there. But it's 7 days a week. So we'll see what happens this week with even, places like normal places like the nail salons and massage therapy. I mean, I don't license those, but I'm still responsible for responding to any concerns or complaints that people might have. So today was day one. We'll see what the week brings.
I don't know, did police and fire, have you guys had an increase in calls with concerns?
Well, the good thing, I'm sorry, Chief, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'll defer to the police chief because we don't typically respond to the, I don't want to say that I'm going to get myself in trouble, but the nuisance calls. Like Shelley said, this person isn't wearing a mask. There's too many people here. I don't think they're staying far enough apart. Most of that falls on Chief Desmond. So I'll defer to him on that one.
Well, we were so happy that the skate park finally opened. That was probably one of our biggest issues, was the kids just wanted to skate and get in there. And so it was nice when that finally opened. But yeah, I mean, our biggest thing that we're seeing right now is, in case you haven't noticed, traffic is back. the rush hour seems to be, back, and we're getting the old complaints we used to get in neighborhoods about speeding cars. So I guess that's something that's back to normal. But as far as COVID, we're really not getting the mass complaints too much, mostly crowd issues. Like I said, I know that Yentile Park was an issue the first weekend. I think it's gotten better, at least according to the reports that we get coming in.
Good. Well, thank you all for your continued efforts.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Mahony. And Chief Kavanaugh, I have one last question for you, if I may. I just was curious if you are still collecting receipts from different departments throughout the town for hopefully future reimbursement.
We are still getting receipts for the CARES Act. We actually received a partial payment last week. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it was a substantial payment. So we are, and what basically is happening right now, because we're guesstimating what we've, we have the receipts, but we're guesstimating what we're gonna spend. They gave us a large sum of money, and we're gonna obviously have to square that up with the House eventually, which I've been keeping track of that with the deputy and Brian Perry. But all the departments, including the schools, have come to us for guidance on, can we get reimbursed for this? Is this allowed? And so most of it, honestly, really is. It seems like it's a very easy grant to work with. So I guess only time will tell on that.
Okay, thank you. I think you answered my follow-up question was going to be, does that cover the schools as well? And you have indicated yes. So I just wanted to confirm that.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but thank you. Anything else for the chiefs or for Shelley? Mr. Hull, did you want to chime in here under this one, or?
I think I'm good. They're covering it, and they're I really want to shout out to each of them. Certainly, Shelley, the two chiefs. It's yeoman's work that's been going on now for a few months, so greatly appreciated.
Absolutely, we all really appreciate your efforts and your department's efforts. So continue to keep up the great work, and please stay safe. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move into our next appointment, we're going to see if we can make use of technology here and show a few nice short PSA videos that were debuted last week to the community, thanks to our
town moderator, Rob Peterson.
No further ado.
1 second. Here to remind the residents of Wilmington about the 2020 annual town meeting, which has been recessed and continued to June 27th, 2020, on the softball field at Wilmington High School, located just off Wild Street, set to begin at 9:00 a.m. It is our hope to start the meeting on time, and thus we will need a quorum of 150 voters. I humbly ask that if you plan on attending this year's annual town meeting, you arrive in such a time and manner that you are ready to take up the town's business at precisely 9:00 a.m. Check-in for the meeting will start at 8:00 a.m. Please note that while our annual town meeting typically starts at 10:30 a.m., the decision was made to begin this year's meeting at 9:00 a.m. in an attempt to avoid the mid-afternoon heat. While it is undeniable that this year's annual town meeting will be very different than anything we have ever experienced, we will endeavor to ensure that the purest form of democracy is maintained while also recognizing the precautions needed to be taken in order to safeguard against the current public health crisis. In order to provide the safest, most comfortable environment possible, the town has procured a tent for the occasion and will be taking measures to maintain a temperate environment. We will have comfortably spaced and sanitized seating, no contact voter check-in, one-way footpaths and other safety precautions in place as we strive to provide a safe environment for all attendees. It should be further mentioned that non-residents will not be allowed to attend this year's annual town meeting unless they are acting in a representative capacity on behalf of a specific resident. In such instances, the resident must notify the town clerk and provide the representative's name, address, telephone number, and capacity in which they will be representing the said resident. The town clerk, after consulting with the town moderator, will thereafter notify the resident if the non-resident is clear for admission to the meeting. Any such requests must be submitted to the town clerk no later than 4:00 p.m. on June 24th, 2020, and can be delivered via hand delivery. Please call the town clerk's office for that protocol, and or via email to townclerk@wilmingtonma.gov. More information on the town meeting will be forthcoming in the days and weeks ahead as we work to finalize our plans for this year's annual town meeting. Please be on the lookout for these materials. Each resident needs to make the decision whether they are comfortable attending the town meeting. While town meeting is exempt from limits imposed on public gatherings, I am cognizant of the public health crisis we are dealing with and will continue to monitor the same. I will take all appropriate steps if it is deemed unsafe to hold the meeting, but as of the transmission of this public service announcement, we plan to move forward with the 2020 annual town meeting and welcome all those residents wishing to attend. If you have any questions and/or concerns, please feel free to contact me at moderator@wilmingtonma.gov. Thank you very much for attending to this public service announcement, and I look forward to seeing you on June 27th, 2020 for our annual town meeting set to begin at 9:00 a.m. on the softball field at Wilmington High School, located just off Wildwood Street.
To accommodate changes to the 2020 annual town meeting, the town of Wilmington has provided for additional parking to accommodate the change in venue. As always, parking will be available at the high school and 4th of July parking lots. The lower library parking lot and the first few rows of the Wildwood Cemetery can also be used for additional parking. The small parking lot at the softball field on Wildwood Street will be reserved for handicap parking only. The town will be providing assistance to anyone who needs help in getting from their vehicle to the town meeting location. Anyone who thinks they may need assistance is asked to contact the town moderator at wilmingtonma.gov prior to the meeting. Remember, the 2020 annual town meeting is Saturday, June 27th, beginning at 9:00 a.m. at the softball field at Wilmington High School. We hope to see you there.
Thank you very much.
I am Town Moderator Rob Peterson, here today with Finance Committee Chair John Doherty. We are here to inform voters as to a different procedural motion that will be used at this year's town meeting relative to Article 5, the budget.
Thanks, Rob. Each year, the Finance Committee puts the budget forth to the town meeting via a motion that the budget be taken up by department, resulting in many separate motions and votes for the various town departments. This year, in light of the public health crisis we are experiencing, and in an effort to reduce time spent on procedural motions, the Finance Committee will be putting the budget forth via a motion calling for the entire budget to be voted with one vote. In sum, instead of voting departments such as public safety, general government, etc., voters will be asked to take up one vote on the bottom line of the budget, which is approximately $110 million. The budget can be seen on the town's website and is also where the recommendations by the Finance Committee are.
In taking up the budget this way, the only aim is to streamline the procedural motions and votes. In no way, shape, or form does this process seek to thwart or suppress discussion and/or subsidiary motions that are proper when taking up the budget. I, as moderator, will allow well-grounded, germane conversation and debate on the budget and all of its line items.
If you have any questions or concerns relative to this matter, please direct your correspondence to myself, Jay Doherty, at wilmingtonmass.gov, or our town moderator at moderator@wilmingtonmass.gov. As a reminder, the town meeting will be the 27th at 9 a.m. on the high school softball field. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much to our IT Director, John O'Neill, for setting that up, and thanks to our friends at WCTV. We have the two stars of those videos with us this evening. Town Moderator Robert Peterson is with us, and also Finance Committee Chair John Doherty is with us. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
And thank you to our Town Clerk who's here, who just finished off in a very successful town election. So thank you and good evening to Christina Tuma Conway. Thank you for being here. And I see a couple other department heads. Our assistant town manager is here. George Hooper is here. So thank you guys for being here. And we're going to start to talk about our annual town meeting. I thought that might be helpful for people to see if you haven't seen those excellent PSA videos that are airing now on WCTV and also out there on the social media. So make sure you check those out if you haven't already. but I want to turn it over to the moderator as you can update us where we are just 5 days out from town meeting. Mr. Moderator?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bendel. First of all, on that PSA, I want to make it known that it's Wildwood Street. If you didn't catch it, I said Wild Street at first. I don't want a bunch of people showing up to a swamp next to Silver Lake for the meeting. So again, that's it's the softball field off of Wildwood Street. But first of all, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, our town manager, town clerk, Mrs. Newhouse, respective chiefs, Mr. Doherty, chair of the finance committee, and the plethora of people I'm definitely forgetting. We've had many conversations leading up to this meeting in the past months and weeks, and it's been a complete team effort. I've gotten more emails to my town email account over the past 2 months than probably the past 2 years combined. And I guess it's a good thing because it shows the dedication of the town to our upcoming town meeting. So just basic logistics. I think those videos hit it. All the points that I would like to address relative to the town meeting itself. Just some other logistics that were worth mentioning while we're here is for the pre-meeting procedures and check-in. We will begin check-in at 8:00 a.m. The town clerk can elaborate on that if she would like. It's going to be a contactless check-in. And then one thing I want to touch into, when this year you won't be getting a lanyard, you'll be getting it's a voting card. And again, Tina can expound on that if she has anything else to add there. So again, the meeting will begin at 9:00. It is our hope that at 9:00 we will have the needed 150 resident voters so we can start the meeting on time. And again, the aim at pushing the meeting up to 9:00 a.m. is to try to get the town's business done as quickly and efficiently and as fairly as possible, all while trying to avoid that mid-afternoon heat. So even though we will be under a tent or not, it is not. It's not going to be in the 60s or 70s. It's likely going to be in the 80s. So if we can avoid that mid-afternoon heat, that would be a very good thing. But again, we cannot do so in the face of not providing the proper forum for town meeting and allowing for the process to unfold in a fair and efficient manner.
Thank you, sir. I want to turn it over to town clerk. Tina, did you have anything you wanted to add to let folks know this is one of our last chance we'll be able to relay info to the public? I know they'll be pumping out some more information this week. That's my understanding. We're going to be trying to do a reverse call to folks who have signed up for that to alert them. Anything else you want to let the folks know?
So usually at town meeting, there are 6 different stations to sign in at, and that's separated out by precinct, but that will not be the case this year. You can get into any line, there will be 4 lines. There are 2 entry points, one on Wildwood Street, one over on the stadium side. So at those entry points, there will be 2 poll pads set up at each of those. Voters can just stand in line in any one of those lines and come on in. There won't be lanyards, so there, again, that's contactless as far as checking in is concerned. Voter cards will be handed out, and instead of people standing, if there are standing votes, they'll hold up their voter cards. That's really the only difference in the way the counting of standing votes will be done. There will be people monitoring where folks are going. There will be a separate area for people that are non-residents, and that's most department heads. So we'll be monitoring the way folks are walking in. We'll have guides kind of directing people to the way that we want them to enter the tent, which is from the sides. We don't want anybody entering from the center aisle. We want all entrance into the aisles to be from the sides. So our tellers will be acting as sort of as ushers before the town meeting begins, helping to get people situated before the meeting starts. Anybody that has any questions, please feel free to call my office, and we'll be happy to guide you through the process. We will certainly have taken all advice of the public health director and all of the guidance that's been out there from other agencies, how to do this as safely as possible. And the hand sanitizer will be flowing. I guess we might like something else to be flowing, but we'll have hand sanitizer flowing. So if you have any questions, give a call to my office at 978-658-2030, or you can contact me directly by email at ctouma, touma-conway@wilmingtonma.gov.
Great. Thank you very much. And John, we also have you on the line, Chairman of our Finance Committee. I want to compliment you and the Finance Committee have spent a lot of time combing through all the articles. I know you recently made your recommendations. And then I really want to applaud you on what I believe was a best supporting actor role that you had there.
Not Emmy, but thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. The only comment I would like, just one thing, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make one comment that where Article 5 will be an omnibus vote, any resident can still make a comment or a question on any of the line items within the budget. You know, it doesn't change that at all. Just the vote, that's it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for adding that, Jim. Mr. Hull, I want to turn to you and before I turn to the board members who might have questions or comments.
One point I just wanted to add to Tina's comments is that we will have the finance handbook, Finance Committee handbook, and also has the planning board recommendations. The document that is typically mailed out in advance of the town meeting. Obviously this year, in light of the circumstances, we were not able to do that. The document has been produced and is in my office, and we will have copies on each of the chairs in the seating area in Ziploc bags in advance of the meeting. So when people arrive, they will have the document that they typically refer to during the town meeting.
Great, thank you. And just before I turn to the board members, George, I know you're on the line there, George. I wanted to just ask you, it's my understanding the tent's going to go up Thursday or somewhere around then. And I know your department and others, DPW as well, will be working feverishly to get things set up. Anything you want to add as we approach the final day?
Yeah, we'll be out there actually marking it off at DigSafe on Wednesday, getting the poles, everything in place. Basically, the tent layout will be done all on Wednesday. So when they do come in on Thursday morning, it'll just be a plug and play. We'll get that up. The WCTV and the sound crews will be coming out and laying some of their lines. So I just encourage people to show up early. We'll have hand sanitizer. I'll have crew on just to make sure the bathrooms are being sanitized as we go. So again, just if we can get everybody out there and support the town.
Thank you, George. We appreciate you and your department's efforts, and we wish you cool weather as you get ready to set up.
We will have fans in place. Yeah, we'll try to keep that air moving.
That sounds good. All right, I'd like to turn to the board members if they have questions or comments. Mr. Kyra, I saw your head bob into the music of those videos. I'll start with you.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It kind of drowned out you, Rob, a little bit. I turned to my son and said, I can hear the music louder than I can hear Robbie there.
My wife wants that then, Kevin. My wife would like some of that music pumped through the house.
Just a question on how the budget's being handled this year. This is the first I was hearing that it's going to be handled all together, which is against, I believe, the inhabitant bylaws. Who made the decision to do it? Is it legal that we can do it? I know that maybe under the state of emergency, we're allowed to do it. And have we received legal opinion as to whether we can do it?
No.
Yes, the town council has been involved in all of these discussions, and the opinion that we received from Mark Rich is that this is permissible in this circumstance. Certainly, one of the reasons you will see for members of the board in your packets, you received under the assignment of motions, 2 separate documents. One essentially taking the motions up in the conventional way that they've been done. The other with a more abbreviated set of motions. Ultimately, and certainly the moderator can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is a choice by members of the audience or members of the board not to pursue an omnibus article, that is an option as well, and it would revert back to the conventional way. But the premise was in an effort to try to expedite things, recognizing that discussion is still important. And as was previously noted, any questions can come up about any element of the budget, whether it's any individual department, school department, public buildings, whatever it might be. Those conversations can still take place.
I guess I'm a bit confused now. I mean, I'm a little disappointed this was thrown upon us this evening without anything in the packet, Mr. Hull, to inform us of what the change. Who made the vote? Because the way that PSA sounded as if it was a done deal. So we can take these items up individually to allow the residents the right to speak on them?
I will defer the moderator on that, but certainly my understanding is that if the motion is made to have Article 5 taken up as an omnibus article, and that is not approved, then there's an ability to revert to the traditional approach.
Okay, maybe you can answer my question this time. Who made the decision to take it up as an omnibus budget? And who's supposed to make that decision? And do we have a legal opinion?
Mr. Moderator?
Yeah, just to step in, Mr. Carrot, to address your questions. It was discussed throughout these various past couple of months. They asked how we could go about, as I've explained in these past meetings, the risk for the COVID-19 virus is exposure over time. So it was asked, how do you best way to streamline a meeting and the various items you can use? One of them was the quote unquote omnibus vote, or presenting the budget to be voted on at one time, so you can save yourself the procedural steps of bringing forth each department, motion, a second, discussion, a vote, so on and so forth for each of the departments, various departments as we usually use. So that was brought up. I explained in our discussions in our meetings that we had over these teleconferences that a lot of towns use this quote unquote omnibus. There's either a presentation and the way by which it's brought forth is the finance committee and Jeff and or town council could correct me if I'm wrong. The motion relative to the budget is brought forth by the finance committee. So it was my understanding, and again, watching the finance committee meeting from a few weeks ago when they made their recommendations, that it was even discussed during that meeting that it was a plan of action. And Ms. Doherty, you can correct me if I'm wrong too, that was part of the discussion that was had. So that was a discussion relative to, how to bring this forward. And the discussion had kind of spiraled on before that. So again, council agreed, and Mr. Kyra, I might be ignorant, and I could be, and I'm not anyway saying I'm not, relative to the inhabitant bylaws saying we need to vote it that way. It's my understanding that that's just a common practice because the budget is brought forth by a motion by the finance committee, and we have been doing that. Again, I don't have it's long before I was moderator, probably long before I was even of legal voting age, that we had the option to do this because it was a mechanism brought forth at the meeting by motion, not by inhabitant bylaw. And I've searched and I hadn't saw that either under the section for the finance committee and or the section relative to town meeting. So this had kind of been discussed for a while now. And it was by all folks on all those phone calls. It was decided that that was one way we could save some time at least this year's meeting, and it might be something that folks might want to do moving forward. But again, there's no. You can still have the same questioning for each department, so on and so forth. And that's about my understanding of how this move forward.
John, Mr. Doherty, did you want to respond to the question as well?
I just think it would be easier right now due to the pandemic to shorten the length of time on that article. Any resident can still make a comment, make a question on each line item. And don't forget, it was probably 5 to 6 years ago, we actually changed the way we did it because we used to do it like the town manager's office, the board of selectmen. We didn't lumping into general government. So we went line item by line item. And that was a very long task. You know, we changed over to department. That did speed things up a little. And now by going this way, hopefully, it'll speed it up even more, especially for this one, we're outside.
So I guess to to answer the pointed questions of who is responsible and who has authority, you know, I think there was a collective consensus amongst the folks that have been involved in these conversations that this seemed like an appropriate approach, not looking to try to thwart conversation, but to move the process along. I certainly agreed that it makes sense from a legal perspective, who has the legal authority to make that decision. I'm not sure that we ever, that there was an opinion on that from town council. I know in terms of the discussion about the article with regard to a consent agenda, town council's opinion is that in light of the current circumstances, notwithstanding the fact that the typically articles are drawn by random selection, he believed that it was appropriate in this circumstance. And I think the same basis goes for this Article 5.
Are you saying there's not going to be random selections this year?
One of the points that we'll presumably get to during part of this discussion is with regard to this consent agenda. This was another point that was discussed and is noted in my memo to the board, that there are certain articles clearly that are typically not controversial. It's everything from the recycling compost bins and some of these ministerial articles, such as the appropriation of funds for the Veterans Day and Memorial Day. The discussion was to take those articles and put them into one omnibus motion for one vote. Again, not to say that people can't, if they choose to pull one or more of those articles out or to have any individual discussion about those, but the premise was to have several articles, some of which would typically be under the random selection, taken up in this one motion. Again, the question, I had raised the question, is that permissible in light of the inhabitant bylaws, and council advised that in this circumstance, he did not feel it was a problem.
Yeah, I understand that, and I did see that information, and Mr. Peterson explained that to us the other night, and I agree with what he had said regarding taking up those articles that would just normally run through without a problem, like naming a portion of the library after Peggy Kane or the band room after Barbara Meddy. But are you eliminating random draw after that?
Mr. Carr, I can answer that question. No, we're not.
Okay.
The only in town council gave us his opinion this the other day. Again, as the town manager explained, you should have it in the packet. It was just those ones that we would be lumping together. And my computer's frozen in front of me. So, but those enumerated articles will be in there. Get these presented to the meeting. If anybody has a question on these, they could still have ample opportunity to address. Yeah, there you go. They would still have ample opportunity to address those. But then when we went back in, everything not listed therein would be subject to random selection.
Yeah, I thank you for that. Hang on, someone's calling. Let me get the phone. All right. I guess what I'm trying to avoid is meeting a town meeting and finding that we're not doing it legally because we're taking up the budget all in one piece, and I don't believe the bylaws permit that. So as long as you're telling me we're not going to be spending our time there, spinning wheels and wasting our time, I don't know again, who voted to, I mean, the warrant was put together by the Board of Selectmen. But if you're telling me that our legal KP is to giving us the okay with it, then I guess we're okay, even though we have nothing in writing from them.
Yes, Jeff. I'm sure you can get something like. I'm sure they'd be willing to give it to us in writing, so we can have it on file as well. And there's various emails going back and forth. Okay, quote unquote, okaying this. And again, I'm just going to reiterate my understanding of the bylaws. Are that I can give you my understanding of how warrants are acted on via town meeting forum is that the Board of Selectmen put the warrant out, quote unquote, into the universe. You publish it, it goes out there. And then the motions are what brings the action forward on the floor of town meeting. So it's been our practice. Again, Mr. Doherty had just also stated that we even used to go even more meticulously into these line items in the past, and that had changed. And there was no change to the inhabitant bylaws to do that. And again, I still have, I don't believe there is an inhabitant bylaw precluding us from taking it up this way. And Attorney Rich has been on all of these conversations, for the past 2 months. So if we were running afoul of any bylaw or general law, I would assuredly think he would have brought it up. And again, he's a capable attorney. And I haven't worked with this town council and the past town council. They're both very capable. He has a particular eye for this type of thing. And he has been kind of walking us through these steps just to make sure we're lockstep and key with what we're allowed to do in our efforts to, again, and I don't like I don't like the term quote unquote streamline the meeting, because it seems like you're kind of more a way trying to effectively dispose of it in a way that's not fair and efficient. I just want to put forth anything to the, again, it's not my decision. That's kind of I'm more like a Monday morning quarterback. I can tell you guys what can be suggested, and then it can be acted upon that way. But via all of our conversations, and since it was the finance committee that brings the motion on that specific article, I had assumed there was, and perhaps mistakenly, I had assumed there was a accord across the board. If anyone had any issue with this, it would have been brought up. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this, Mr. Kara, I personally apologize to you for that, but I would have. I assume that the finance committee acting on bringing that forward would have been sufficient. So
I will, and I agree with you. So I don't think that that's a good excuse to use, that we're changing things up because of that. But okay, I see.
I just want to add just one quick thing, and I can tell you, I get inundated with all this information from the Massachusetts Modern Association all day into my personal. They have a Gavel line Google group that everyone kind of communicates back and forth on, mainly just ideas about town meetings and everything. And I believe it was the State Board of Health too, and Mrs. Newis can correct me if I'm wrong, but the real issue here is the risk for the COVID-19 virus is exposure over time. So all of the literature I'm reading is whatever you can do to have a fair and efficient meeting, and do so. Again, I failed to even figure out a word that doesn't use streamline, but to get it done in as timely a manner as possible will kind of lead you away from what the public health officials are saying is exposure over time is your risk for the disease, which is kind of why all these steps are being taken.
I agree with you, but I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Moderator, that we're going to be there for some time, so I don't think that that's going to be avoidable. But with that said, I just want to make sure that we're not going to town meeting to find out at the end of the meeting that we did something that wasn't legal. And that's why, we should make sure that KP Law is giving us the okay to do it the way the finance committee is suggesting it be done this year.
I will
Thank you.
ask
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
that council put it in writing clearly based upon the numerous calls that have taken place, conference calls, Zoom sessions over the last couple of months. This has clearly been a discussion point in whether it was in an email that he affirmed this or whether it was a verbal conversation. Clearly, he would have objected, in my estimation, if he found it problematic, but I will make sure that he puts it in writing.
Thank you.
Mr. Kyra, I just want to jump to Mr. Eaton. I saw your hand go up a number of times. Do you have a comment on this particular discussion?
I do, Mr. Bendel, thank you. So just reading from the inhabitant bylaws, section 23, failure to comply. Failure to comply with any of the requirements contained in section 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, or section 22 of this chapter shall not invalidate any vote or action of the town. Many of those have to do with how town meeting is conducted. So if there's some technicality that we do not abide by the letter of the law in the inhabitant bylaws, it doesn't mean that we're all going to have to come back in 4 weeks for another town meeting on the softball field. So what was not listed in that was section 10, and that has to do with how some of the articles are presented. In section 10A, subsection 5 is to appropriate monies for expenses of the town and salaries of town officers and departments and determine how same shall be raised. That's a pretty ambiguously written statement. And we've actually, I think it's Article 47, we are putting forward to specifically address how the budget itself is presented at town meeting. As far back as I can remember, we did it department by department. Yeah, it's a long and arduous process, but my understanding of really what the point of this is the amount of time that's being saved is the amount of time that somebody's making a motion for a department, it's seconded, and then there's a vote. We're just doing one motion, 1 second. The discussion is all the same across all different departments, and then there's just one vote for all of them. So really the only amount of time that we're saving is the amount of departments that we do that by -1 because we're just doing it one time. So everyone's gonna have the same budget information in their booklet that they normally do. If somebody has a question on the DPW budget, somebody has a question on the finance director, town accountant's budget, they can ask it. It's just not all necessarily in order. It's just the only thing that we're being changed is we're just going to take it all up at once, and it's at fault. And my reading of section 10A sub 5 of the inhabitant bylaws that falls in that pretty ambiguously written subsection.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that if certainly members of the board, if a majority of the board is not comfortable with this approach and wants to take the approach that has been taken historically, then certainly I would like to know that, and we can go back to the prior process. I don't think, we've been this group that included John Doherty, Rob Peterson, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the town council, and others, have been trying to work through getting to a place where we can get the town meeting to go as efficiently as possible. If there's real concern about any of these, then we ought to hear that now, and we can certainly change the game plan.
Turn back to Mr. Kyra. Did you have any follow-up, or did you have any further questions?
No, I have no further questions, but you're asking us to do something right now when we should have been informed about this maybe a week, or if you've been meeting and having all of these discussions and we're finding out about it 5 days before the event, and now you want us to make that decision without getting some opinion from legal counsel. And I don't get it, Mr. Hall.
Well, the fact is that if council had objected, if council believed this was illegal and was not going to, it was going to result in an invalid annual town meeting, in my estimation, he would have told us.
I don't understand why it's been kept quite a secret until tonight, but that's okay. I mean, let's move on. I'm all set, Mr. Bendel.
Well, it's not a secret, but, you know.
Sorry, I think I lost my connection there for a moment. I think we're going to move on to Mr. De Palma. Do you have any questions for these folks?
No, I don't. Mr. Peterson answered mine. I had a couple of legal questions, but they were answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eaton?
Just a few others, completely changing the subject. I'm just confirming that people can bring food and drink to keep themselves fed and hydrated during this, correct?
Correct.
That's it.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Sure. Just a few things. First, I do believe a lot of what is here had been either raised at the joint meeting or in previous discussions. So I don't necessarily agree that this is all new information tonight. Because none of this is surprising to me. I feel like we definitely, and again, I don't know if it's from watching the other meetings, but I feel like this was brought up in discussions in the past when we had the clerk and the moderator here about these possibilities. And ultimately, it's going to be up to the people who show up to vote on how we proceed, correct?
Correct.
You know, so it's not a decision that we make unilaterally. It's a decision that the people who come to participate in town meeting are going to make. That being said, one of my questions was for Mr. Hull. I know a survey had been sent out last week, kind of to gauge if people were coming. I'm a little bit concerned about the quorum factor, especially, you know, tonight Tewksbury's doing their town meeting. And by the accounts of the people that are there that I can text, it sounds like there's about 60 people there. So I'm a little bit concerned about a 9 a.m. start on a day that's scheduled to be a warm day. You know, do we have any indication from that survey as to how many residents plan on attending?
I would defer to John O'Neill on that. I believe when we talked earlier today, it was something in the order of 80 or 90 that had expressed an intention to attend. Is that number still accurate, John?
It is. We've had a total of 207 responses. Currently, the survey stands that 81 of those responses say they will be at town meeting. 88 say no, 38 are unsure. With question 2, where we asked if those individuals will be attending on their own, 57 said they would be attending on their own. 52 said they would be attending with one other person. 9 said they would be attending with a group of 2 to 4 people. And 1 individual said they would be attending with a group of 5 or more individuals.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I would just suggest, you know, we just came off of an election that was uncontested in a very hot day in the middle of a pandemic. And I think it was 555 people voted. Ms. Clark, is that accurate, Tina?
Actually, 557. There were 2 counted ballots.
So, you know, my suggestion is, and there's over 8,000 members of that unofficial community page that feels free to air their concerns very openly under the, you know, the cloud and protection of social media, that they don't actually have to stand in front of a microphone and have a discussion. So my suggestion would be, and you know, I'm sure that same page, thankfully, that I don't read is going to call me out for saying this. If you have a concern about an article that's going to be presented this weekend, or you have a concern about our town budget, or, you know, you want your voice to be heard in a meaningful way in front of the people who are helping to make the decisions to formulate this town, come to the meeting if you can safely do so. It sounds like, you know, we've had this task force almost of people trying to make sure we can keep it as safe as possible. I appreciate all the efforts of everyone trying to logistically set up a way that we can still do this and maintain kind of this open town meeting that we have. But it doesn't it has no value if we can't get people there to actually participate in it. And I know that we have the challenges of the potential heat, the pandemic, you know, the rules about having to wear, none of us are going to be happy having to wear a mask for however many hours it is. But the reality is we have some important things that are on this. We have a budget that's really important. We are in the middle of a pandemic that's probably going to impact that budget, you know, over the next year or two. So, you know, I'm personally asking if you feel comfortable going to other events that are outside right now, or going to, you know, these stores that are reopening and these restaurants that you can now eat inside, you know, try to get the same comfort level to come to the town meeting and participate in this, because I think it's really important to try to get that quorum right at 9 o'clock and to be able to get as much done. We don't want to have to not be able to get the town's work done because we didn't get enough people there. So that's just kind of my ask. And then on a kind of lesser note, I was also wondering, I think the chief had mentioned on another meeting when we were kind of talking about logistics, the possibility of there being water available if people needed it. And I didn't know if that was something that had been part of the planning. It sounds like we have the hand sanitizer and we're going to have the kind of the, you know, everything else in place. Should people be bringing their own water to this? Should they be bringing, you know, kind of their own sustenance, or is there going to be water available if they need it?
So yeah, I mean, we're going to have some, but again, we can't plan for having, you know, providing it throughout the meeting. It's mostly for, you know, medical issues if people are kind of being overcome or anything like that. So we would encourage everyone to bring their own water, Gatorade, and just be mindful to, you know, there'll be trash receptacles around to make sure you discard your trash, you know, appropriately, so that the public works guys aren't having to pick it all up after the meeting.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Bendel, just a quick follow-up, if I could. With all due respect, Selectman O'Mahony, I don't recall there being any discussion on how the budget would be taken up omnibus. I may have missed the last finance meeting. They may have talked about it then, but the joint meeting certainly didn't talk about it. And I know that we haven't talked about it as a Board of Selectmen. And then you made the comment, though, that the voters will decide on which way to vote. So are you saying that the voters are going to vote first as to take it up separately, or to take it up as omnibus budget?
And I mean,
that's not what I heard from Mr. Doherty, that it's already going to be taken up altogether.
No, that was.
I just want some clarification there.
Sure.
This is Omar.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Doherty, but what I was saying was my understanding, and all of the times I've heard this discussed, is that it would be presented to the people at town meeting if they wanted to vote on taking it up as one vote. That would be the initial vote, and then should the people there decide they want to take it up as one vote, we would proceed to do that. That it's not up to us to decide how it's going to be presented. It's up to them.
Okay, because that's not the way it was presented by Mr. Doherty. It was presented as if it's already a done deal. It's going to be taken up all at once as an omnibus budget. That was my understanding. But maybe Ms. O'Mahony is correct in her interpretation.
Mr. Doherty, we'll take a few steps back. Mr. Doherty, you mind giving a quick recap of the recommendation the Finance Committee made?
We had no problem taking it up as an omnibus budget, okay? Also, the Board of Selectmen have a warrant article number 47, to make it an omnibus budget in the future as well. So the Board of Selectmen has brought this up in the past, and they have.
Well, I'm not in favor of that. And the reason why it was brought up, because there was a bylaw committee that put all those forward, and the Board of Selectmen found it important to put that before the entire town. I, for one, am not in favor of it.
It doesn't take any rights of the voters. The voters can still make any comment or questions. We've had in the past, and I think you've been on the committee, one gentleman wanted to increase the OPEB from 1 million to 5 million that we spoke on for a while. You know, so anything they want.
Excuse me for interrupting. I understand that. I guess I'm trying to follow up on Selectman O'Mahony's question. What was posed is that at the town meeting, we're first going to vote as to whether to take it up, the budget the way we used to, or whether to take it up as the omnibus proposal. And I don't know that that's true, but can someone answer that? Are we taking it up one way or the other? Or are we allowing the residents to decide?
Mr. Carr, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Mr. Moderator, do you want to answer that question and walk us through exactly how, when we get to Article 5, how it will happen?
I will. So how it works is the warrant is put forth by the Board of Selectmen, and all that does is outline the four corners of the legal business the town can act on at our annual town meeting. We must act on every single article the Selectmen put forth. When it comes to the floor of town meeting, you're not acting on the warrant, you're acting on the motions brought before the meeting by the various either departments, or if it's a petition article, it's a petitioner that brings it. In Wilmington, when we get to Article 5, the motion is typically brought by the Finance Committee to bring the warrant forth, and we vote by, and again, I don't know the dictate of the exact language, but it says for the various departments, and then then I go to the chair of the Finance Committee. He comes back. Then we bring up. Then that's voted on. So we actually have a vote inside town meeting, which is Article 5, which is why there'd be no reason if it was in our town inhabitant bylaws that we had to do that. That would necessitate a vote. So I'm even more steadfast in my belief that it's not an inhabitant bylaw that we have to do that. That is just the way things are done. And it's brought, so we take that vote. So that's the initial vote. And if you recall, each year that I've been there, so this is going on, it's my sixth town meeting, the first vote is for Article 5 to take them up by department. That's a motion brought forth by the chair of the Finance Committee, seconded, brought forth by discussion. A couple years ago, a gentleman brought a motion on the floor of town meeting that he did not agree with that. And he made a motion, I believe it was a subsidiary motion to amend, that we take the budget up as a whole, because in his words, he said, well, we can still have time to talk on it. You can still make changes, but we're going to go through all this rigmarole. And, and he had he went into a little diatribe, but anyways, that eventually failed, mainly because it was hard to understand kind of what was going on, because it was an odd way to procedurally bring it before the meeting. So our first motion is to take it up by budget. That's how we historically do things. But this year, instead of that being the main motion, or what we have talked about over the past several weeks and months, is a way to take care of the town's business and get rid of, again, you're not getting rid of any substantive issues. You're only getting rid of procedural issues with having to do that, motion for public safety, for general government, so on and so forth. So the motion will be brought to the floor of town meeting by the chair of the Finance Committee, as is historically done, that we take up the budget as a quote unquote omnibus bill, or we just vote the bottom line of the budget. All of the discussion will be entertained inside the four corners, again, of that article. So if you have a question relative to, I'm trying to think of various things,
police overtime.
DPW, police overtime, DPW, any of that stuff, that's all perfectly well grounded and can be addressed by whoever would properly answer the question. So again, it was a discussion to which town council was in on. Again, unless there was some reckless disregard for the legalities of how this was going to move forward, and someone was asleep at the wheel, I don't really see any. There's no legal issue to this, because if there was, it would have been brought up. If we want to dot our I's and cross our T's, we can get a signature to an email chain that have been going back and forth for months. But that's how it was discussed to be brought forward for this meeting. The chair of the Finance Committee, who I assume after discussion with fellow members of the Finance Committee, and I know there was discussion of it because it was brought up during the vote when they talked about the warrant article relative to keeping it this way. It was said, well, we're going to do it at this time, so why don't we see how it goes and we'll move forward. And Mr. Doherty, correct me if I'm putting words in somebody's mouth, but I believe that was what happened. So that is how this has been put forth or have been discussed in the past weeks and months.
And that, Mr. Chair, thank you. And that's how I understood it, Mr. Peterson, that it would come up as an omnibus. And I just wanted to clarify that, because Selectman O'Mahony said that there would be a vote by the voters to see which way it would go. And I just want to make sure that we're clear that it's just going to be brought up as an omnibus budget.
Correct, but
Okay.
as in every year, though, that vote is susceptible to dissension. So if somebody dissents and says, I don't want to do it that way, I want to do it the way we've always done it, they can bring a subsidiary motion to amend the main motion on the floor.
How is it going to be proposed, though? Is it going to be proposed that it being taken up the way it has been as years past?
The Finance Committee chair is recommending it to be taken up as an omnibus budget.
Okay, so
That would be
won't
my
have
first
that option.
All right, sorry, I didn't hear you, Mr. Kara. Sorry, I was between you and Doherty, talking over each other.
Sorry about that. So they won't have that option because it's going to be brought up as an omnibus budget.
No,
But
they do have it.
I just wanted to be clarified.
I just have to clarify one thing though. But they do have the option because the town meeting always has the option, because as I just kind of iterated in that discussion, it has been brought up in the past that we don't do it as the way we've been doing it. So if the main motion is brought forth to the floor of town meeting, that we take it as an omnibus or quote unquote one vote for the bottom line, any person at town meeting could say, well, I make a motion to amend that we take the budget up by department. So then, or that's one way to do it. Or if you don't want to take it up by the omnibus, they could just, you vote it down, and then it would have to be brought forth in another way. So there is an avenue if people wanted it to be done in the quote unquote the old way, or the way we typically do it. There is an avenue for that.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to add or ask of these fine folks before we encourage everyone to get out and attend town meeting with us?
Just one quick question, please.
Sure, Mr. De Palma.
Did I hear that you're going to be doing a reverse 911 to notify people that of the meeting and everything else?
Mr.
That's
Hart?
right. Yes.
Thank you.
And I think the plan, just to further that answer, is to midweek or middle of this
That's
week.
right. Either Wednesday or Thursday, one of those days.
It should be noted that that reverse 911 message will only go to residents who have opted in to receive those types of notifications.
So it's certainly one measure. It's not going to get everybody, inform everyone, but I think between obviously this meeting this evening, the reverse 911 and the various news outlets that cover these meetings, I think we're doing as much as we can to alert people that there is a town meeting at 9 a.m. on Saturday, the 27th.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, with that, we'll conclude this conversation. Our thanks to each of you who've joined us and participated in the conversation. I know you guys have been putting a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort. John, please relay our thanks to your committee for their efforts, for their time, their volunteerism. And we look forward to seeing all of you on Saturday. And again, we want to encourage folks to join us at the annual town meeting this coming Saturday, 9 a.m., the Wilmington High School softball field. Okay, Mr. Hall, we'll move into our third and final appointment.
Yes, this is the discussion of assignment of articles. As I noted previously, there are actually two versions of this that were presented. The first being what I would refer to as the conventional version, which would be without any changes in the way Article 5 and Article 6 are considered, and also without any kind of a consent agenda article. This is the way it has been traditionally done. So this was put forward as one option. The second approach is based upon the premise that there is going to be a consent agenda, which would have the articles that were previously noted on the screen, but essentially articles 2, 4, 35, 36, 37, 38, 40, 42, 43, 44, 45, 54, 55, and 56.
Okay, and just to be clear, Mr. Hull, you'd be looking for the board to take a vote here this evening on which option they prefer, A or B. Is that correct?
Well, so if certainly if the board is not comfortable with the approach that has been discussed under the prior agenda piece here and believes that the board, that town meeting should proceed as it customarily has, and that Article 5 be taken up by department or by category, and that there not be any consideration given to a consent agenda article, and also to take up Article 6 as one motion, then I would be looking for you to take a vote that that's not what you want to happen, and then we'll proceed in the conventional way.
Okay, perhaps we'll start with discussion before, so we'll make sure everybody's comfortable and exactly what we'll be voting, what vote you're looking for. When it comes to the assignment of articles, I'll start with discussion with Mr. Kyra.
Yeah, is the assignment of articles option A, that is the old way to do it? Is that what I'm to understand? And
yes,
assignment of articles B is the new way to do it.
Mr. Kyra,
right.
can you just repeat that? Okay. What you just said? I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Say that again. I'm just going by
your response to the answer.
I said was option A is the old way, use my quotation fingers, the way we do it, and B is the new way.
Thank you.
Is how we're being proposed to do it. So does the first option mean that we're not taking up an omnibus budget?
If the board is inclined to pursue the articles in the old format, then that's right. Option A would be not taking up any of these omnibus articles. Okay. It would be going under the system that the town has gone through in prior town meetings.
And if we take up option B, then we have the omnibus budget right. And the articles together. Okay.
Yes, I mean, so
what happens if Mr. Doherty at the town meeting decides he's making a motion to take the budget up as an omnibus budget, but we vote tonight to go with option A?
Then
I'm confused.
The approach that is in article or option B, then in that instance, if Mr. Doherty elects to pursue Article 5 in one omnibus motion, then I don't think that really has any effect on the order of motions that the Board of Selectmen would take up, because all of those motions under Article 5 would be taken up by Mr. Doherty anyways. If you look at the option A, it notes that under the omnibus, under the Article 5, salaries and expenditures, all departments available, all of those categories, subcategories, 5, 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, are all taken up by Mr. Doherty. So whether or not he wishes to pursue them all in one article or in multiple articles, they're all taken up by him. So that's not going to throw off the queue, so to speak.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. De Palma?
Yeah, on option B, if we take the omnibus, everyone still has the right to bring up a certain line item in that area that we'd be bringing up. It just seems like it would be a smoother transaction. It'd be, you know, for the lack of a better word, faster. But the residents would still have a right to speak on any article that there is in there. So you know, to make it more smoother and bring it up to date a little more, I believe that it would be the best way to go would be the option B. Everyone's going to have you're going to have your right anyways to speak on any issue. So what is the difference other than you're cutting out some time on addressing each and every article?
Thank you, sir.
The only distinction really is that option B reduces the number of motions that are presented. That's really the nature of the change.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Eaton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So here's how I understand it, and somebody please tell me if I'm wrong on something. Option A is kind of an ordinary town meeting, what we do one article at a time, one article at a time. Option B, most of the articles are taken one by one, but there's a consent agenda, so certain articles that typically do not generate a lot of discussion are lumped together and can be discussed during that time, but there's only one vote for all of them. For both option A and option B, Article 5, the budget, falls within the historical the historical position who makes the motion, which is the chair of the finance committee. So either option A or option B, the chair of the finance committee could make at his discretion whatever motion he wants. If Mr. Doherty wanted to, in theory, make a motion that we're going to take up the budget and we're going to vote on every single penny and how it's spent, then he could do that. And it doesn't really matter if we vote option A or option B because we're just handling other articles. And what has been discussed is Mr. Doherty potentially making a motion that would deal with the budget at once as opposed to department by department. But to me, this falls within the discretion of Mr. Doherty how the budget itself is handled, and we're just being asked to vote on whether we want to handle the other articles that we traditionally present, the non-resident petitioned articles, one by one or with a consent agenda to help move things along, I suppose. Is that, where did I miss it?
I think you have it accurately. I think in Article 5, the chair of the Finance Committee historically has taken up those motions, whether there's one motion or whether there are 5 or 6 motions associated with that article, those would be taken up by the chair of the Finance Committee. So any change in process this year from prior years is not going to impact the other articles to be brought forward by the Board of Selectmen. Just as a matter of point of information, the way that I've structured these is starting out with the chair of the board and then proceeding in order of seniority of board members. So there's really no, particular, that's the rationale. So in terms of how the board wishes to proceed with these articles, if there are particular articles that one member or another wants to take up, this is the time to let me know. For example, on option B, if Selectman DePalmer does not want to take up the article on portable radios and wants to take up another one, now's the time to let me know. So it was really into this process, which we do every year prior to annual town meeting, was to just give the board an opportunity to look at the order of motions, and if anybody wants to change it up, let me know and we'll reformat it for the town meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I did notice that in option B, Selectman Kyra had, I think, 13 articles in his consent agenda, and the first one I had was one article to pay a $50 invoice, which I took to mean that you didn't want me to talk too much, so I'll be done for the rest of tonight.
No, Mr. Bendel, can I go? I agree with Mr. Eaton's assessment on it. It doesn't make sense not to go with option B because if either way, the finance committee is going to present an omnibus budget. So it doesn't matter A or B. It does make more sense to go with B. But before I make a motion to that extent, maybe some of the other selectmen might.
Sure. Thank you. I'd like to turn to Mrs. O'Mahony first, please.
Sure. I agree that option B seems to make sense to try this year. And I just wanted to make it clear to the people who are listening right now who might not be looking, might not have this printed out in front of them, that, option B doesn't negate discussion for the important matters about the different feasibility studies that have been discussed, about, some of the different kind of future planning that the town is going to be discussing that day. Those are still individual items. They're not lumped together. So, I just wanted to make it clear. It seems like, and I'm assuming, Mr. Hull, you're the one who kind of created the buckets that they were put in.
I'm sorry.
So the option B, the kind of lump, the
Yes.
lumping of them, you created that?
Yes. So in the case of each of the order of the warrant, I prepared back quite some time ago, and you'll recall was initially presented to the board as a draft, and ultimately the board consented to post the warrant as it was prepared. So I prepared the order of the articles, and in the case of Article 6, for example, which historically has been addressing all the various vehicles, in the past, there's been a motion on each one of those. So a motion to approve police cruisers, a motion to approve fire apparatus, and so on. This year, again, along the theme of trying to reduce the number of motions, Article 6 is proposed to be considered as one motion as opposed to 7 or 8 individual motions. But to answer your question, yes, I prepared the order of articles.
Okay, so I mean, looking at it and how they're kind of lumped together, it makes sense why they're kind of grouped the way they are. And again, if a constituent doesn't agree with one of the line items, then they have the ability to amend the motion to exclude that line item. And at that point, I would assume that would either put it into a different discussion, or, it would have to be voted separately. I think in the interest of trying to keep things on point as much as possible, some of this does kind of fall into the discussions we had about the bylaws committee's recommendations, and maybe this is the year that we're kind of being forced to try things in a different way anyway. But I think option B seems to make sense. And I think as long as the people who are there are clear that, this isn't a way to circumvent or to kind of sneak something in to be approved, everything is still spelled out. Some of the items that we believe are going to warrant more discussion are still kind of their own item, like the feasibility, like I said, the feasibility studies for the various buildings that are being proposed. But some of the, items that are routinely voted on at every town meeting have been kind of put together. And I think it makes sense to do that this year, especially given kind of what we're up against in the times that we're in. So I would be supporting option B.
Thank you very much. And before we entertain a motion for a vote here, I'd like to put the three gentlemen also on the call just to get your recommendation. Mr. Hall, Mr. Doherty, Mr. Peterson, I'll start with you, Mr. Moderator. Do you have a recommendation for the board?
Well, first, I'd like to say that regardless of what quote unquote option we chose to bring forward to the meeting, there still will be fair, efficient, and adequate debate on each and every article within the confines, the four corners of the warrant. So there will be no disservice to democracy or justice, if regardless of which plan of action we choose. However, given all the information I've been given, reading what the health experts are saying relative to again that formula, exposure over time. And in an effort to conduct this meeting as efficiently as possible, I would support the omnibus presentation of Article 5 or the consent agenda with those various articles in it, which is option B. And I just want to, if you would indulge me for 1 second, Mr. Chair, I think the effort should be we're trying to make town meeting a more quote unquote friendly environment and a more user friendly environment. And I've gotten very confused during this meeting myself as to kind of what's going on. So I can imagine what folks at home are kind of sitting there thinking. So I just wanted to reiterate that in the next probably day or so, I'm going to be publishing something more on the town's website that'll kind of lay out how the meeting is going to proceed pending the vote of this board here tonight, and I'll kind of lay out exactly what you can expect. And I hope people will check the town website to read that, just so we can all get on the same page. And I'm also pretty cognizant of the fact that watching an open and fair debate amongst this board or discussion, you're kind of vetting things out, so that kind of adds to some confusion as to when you're watching as to what's going on. So again, just tune into the town's website the next couple of days, and I'll have something laying out exactly the procedure for this year's town meeting. And again, just to reiterate for the 1900th time, we're going to be experiencing a different town meeting unlike anything we've ever seen. So this has been a work in progress, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time to make sure the town can have our meeting this year. Right, wrong, or otherwise, if you disagree or agree with something, we had to make a decision and we had to go with it. And I hope everyone turns up, or we get a good showing for our meeting on Saturday.
Great, thank you, sir. Mr. Doherty, do you have a recommendation for this board?
I would highly recommend B. It doesn't take anything away from the residents. They still get to talk about each individual one if they would like to. And if the moderator so allowed, take one of the articles out if they wanted a separate article for that one. So I urge B, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And finally, Mr. Hull, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I think B for the reasons that have previously been noted.
Great. Okay. All right. With that, would anybody?
Motion? Would you like a motion, Mr. Chair?
If you're offering, we'll take it.
Sure, I'm offering. Seeing how the budget's going to be an omnibus budget, whether we go with A or B, makes more sense with going with B, the consent agenda. So I'll make that into a motion.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. We'll go for a roll call vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is also a yes, so that's unanimous. So thank you, folks, for that discussion. And once again, can't thank you guys enough that are on the call, Mr. Doherty, Mr. Peterson, and everybody else who's been influential in getting us to this point. And we're really, really encouraging folks to get out for town meeting and bring a friend, bring a few friends, bring a few neighbors, and join us at 9 a.m. this coming Saturday, June 27th, on the high school softball field for our annual town meeting.
Just a quick question to the moderator. I have 12 articles, Mr. Moderator. Are you going to cut me short on all those, I hope? Just, can I take them all as numbers?
I'm going to let you read each and every one of them. You best practice your oration skills.
Wonderful.
We're looking forward to it. Again, thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to communications. Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind, one of the things that we intended to bring up under the COVID discussion and neglected to was the discussion about our staffing arrangements. And I had asked Carrie to be on this conversation to just outline to the board what our plans are in terms of town operations. As you know, most of the staff have returned to their regular schedules. The town hall is still in a, some people are still working from home, but Carrie has been working with Shelley Newhouse to lay out plans to allow people to come back and work safely. And I just wanted to ask Carrie if you could outline where we are with that.
Carrie, we're always pleased to have you with us, so forgive us for skipping over that, but good evening to you.
No problem at all. Good evening, everyone. I'll give you the highlights of what has been happening with each of the departments and where we're going to be going over the next week or two. Public buildings personnel returned to their full-time staffing on May 18th. And prior to that time, it really was dependent on which location an employee worked at determined their schedule prior to that. But they've been back full-time for about 5 weeks now. The DPW is about at 95% full staffing as of May 26th. And there are a few remaining remote workers. They will return to their workplace at their regular schedule as of next Monday, but they are working remotely right now. Elderly Services Department, most employees have been working their full-time regular schedule at the senior center since this all began. They really didn't stop doing anything other than having people come into the building. Their ongoing services right now are meals delivery, responding to phone calls, programming on WCTV like an exercise program, and they're also continuing with outreach right now. Last week, the Elderly Services Department had a volunteer appreciation luncheon. It was a drive-by event with balloons and waving and little goodies passed out. There were about 85 people that participated that had been delayed due to COVID. And AJ's provided lunch for the 85 people, and there were very good comments about that nice luncheon that was held. But of course, socially distanced. All they did was pick up their lunch. Over the weekend, there was an Eagle Scout project at Elderly Services. David Woltag was the Eagle Scout that led the project, and it was all approved by the Board of Health. There was a rehab of the bocce court. There are rolling raised garden beds now at the Elderly Services building, and solar lights were installed. Elderly Services is trying a new thing right now. Today, they had 9 attendees at an outdoor book club event. So they're keeping socially distance, a group of less than 10 people, and they're going to try it out and see how that proceeds. So it was a good event today, and they'll try more as time goes on. The tax program has resumed. That was put on hold in March at Elderly Services. And this is for the people who had previously signed up for the program. Again, this has been approved by the Board of Health. And the elders who had signed up before and have been waiting to have their taxes completed for them are being met out in the parking lot with the 3 representatives that do the taxes. And those 3 people are all in different rooms in the Elder Services building. So everybody's being socially distanced and wearing masks. And Terry, of course, is participating in the weekly calls with the Department of Elder Affairs. So she's keeping updated on what other towns are doing and where they'll be going next. Veteran Services. They started out remotely in the beginning, but since then they've found that they're more efficient in the office. They're wearing masks, socially distancing, and they are seeing minimal people by appointment only. And it's primarily to sign up new veterans for their services. And when I touched base with Lou today, he said there was a nice comment from DVS, who is the Division of Veteran Services in Boston. And they said that Wilmington has been one of the busiest offices in the state the entire time. So they haven't stopped submitting claims on behalf of the veterans. They've been very busy and they're keeping up to date. So they're not behind at all. And the veterans are receiving their reimbursements very quickly. So that's very positive news. And I think all of you are aware that the Veterans Department ran the Memorial Day ceremonies and had a car parade around the monuments. The Library Department, staff returned to the library per their regular schedule on May 26th for curbside pickup. And on June 1st, they began taking book returns. And in the beginning, they split up the alphabet by last name, half at a time, just to be able to process all the books that were being returned. They have since caught up, and everything's running as it should be. They're picking up books that have been pre-ordered. They're also residents are also able to drop off books when they are finished with them. And again, the library staff is continuing their online programming. And as far as the town hall goes, we've continued to provide services to residents, either through socially distancing outside, through our windows. We have drive-up windows, as we call them, and people come up and we can provide documentation to them or review documents at the window, such as permits. And also we're using the Dropbox and phone calls. All employees will be returning to their regular full-time schedule on next Monday, June 29th. And it's not many people, because many of us have been working full-time for about a month now on our regular schedules, but there are some people who have been working remotely or working different days of the week just to socially distance in the departments due to the 25% capacity rules, which just changed today. So as of today, we can have 50% capacity in our offices. Last week, Shelley, George, and I reviewed each department. We looked at the office layouts to determine where we could make modifications to create cubicles or put up petitions so that we had physical barriers to separate employees that might otherwise be too close. And in other cases, we looked at where we would have to relocate employees in the building in order to bring them back and meet state guidelines. So we'll start having some people relocated as of Monday. Some will be temporary relocations, and others will be longer term relocations until the state eases up on the guidelines and eases up on the 50% guideline. So we'll have some people working in different locations, like room 9 will become an office for someone. And we'll have a few offices in the auditorium, and we'll be using the small conference room temporarily until we can get that person back to their regular department location. And of course, the temporary movements will be dependent on fabrication of the petitions or the cubicles and the installation of partitions. So we'll have to, this is going to be a work in progress. We're all aware that public buildings and IT are busy preparing for our town meeting outside this weekend. So once they finish that work, they'll move on to helping to create the petitions and set up people with laptops in other locations, make sure that they can access all their documentation. But we do have a plan, and I think that things will work out fine. And we'll continue to provide services to the residents in the existing manner going forward for at least the time being until we get people settled.
I would also just note in terms of these partitions that Carrie has mentioned, you know, the intent is that this is a temporary arrangement. So for example, in room 9, we're not looking to create permanent partitions in there. Obviously, the intent is that hopefully in the next few months, we will be able to return to a greater level of normalcy. So to the extent people are working in that office, for example, it's only on a temporary basis, and these partitions will be designed in such a way they can be readily taken down and stored for our next some other use.
Great. Kerry, thank you very much for that update. We appreciate all the efforts of all the departments. I would only add that whoever's going to be set up in an office in room 9, don't let them get comfortable. It's my hope that we can get back in there.
I hope so too. I agree.
Anybody else have a question or comment for Kerry?
Just a comment of thank you, Kerry, for the work that you're doing. and what all the town department heads are faced with and are doing to continue to service the residents. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can't help but think when you use the word temporary that you're both located at the temporary town hall, as they said back in the early 80s.
Right.
That's right.
Hopefully we'll get them back to their offices soon.
I hope so. All right. Thank you, Carrie, for joining us. Really appreciate that update.
Absolutely.
Mr. Hull, we'll turn to communications, please.
Yes, so under communications, the first.
Before we do, I just want to again mention, as I did the previous meetings, if any member has a question or comment about any of these, feel free to jump in.
So the next item under communications is a memo just outlining where things stand or stood as of Friday with respect to restaurants who are seeking authorization for either open seating or authorization to serve alcohol in those open seating areas. So to this point, we have approved outdoor seating and serving of alcohol at the 99 Rocco's and Tremezzos. Approval for outdoor seating only Burger King, Country Kitchen, Greg's, Poncho's, Peter's Pizza, Red Heat, Tremezzos Pizza, and Wilmington House. And on the docket is Casablanca. They're seeking authorization for outdoor seating at this point.
Mr. Chair, just a question on that. Mr. Hull, Red Heat Tavern is not, they haven't sought out permission to have alcohol be served outside. Is that what I'm reading on this report? And Casablanca hasn't, Casablanca too has not asked for alcohol to be served?
That's right. As of Friday, neither of them had made that request.
Okay.
Next under correspondence is information from the Mass DOT, and this is with respect to the commuter schedules. The MBTA is looking to modify the commuter schedule. They recognize that given the circumstances, the people's schedules are changing. They've established this Flex Pass pilot program, which will run from July 1st through September 30th. It's available with an M-Ticket app only. And they're also, as part of this effort, people can get tickets from any zone for a 10% discount as compared to 5 round-trip tickets under the old system. Also beginning July 1st, youth pass holders can purchase half-price fares for all commuter rail zones, either at the ticket window or on board or via the M-Ticket app. Additionally, they're noting here that there's a one-time extension for commuter rail ticket expirations for beginning June 22nd. Commuters may use expired paper commuter tickets that were valid on March 10th. And they will, those tickets will be available for use for 90 days. If commuters are not able to use them during that 90-day period, then the T will repurchase those tickets at the end of the state of emergency. Next, I have correspondence with regard to the status of the grant for the North Wilmington rail platform. This is, as you know, been a longstanding discussion and issue. You'll also recall that the town received some earmarked funds in the amount of $180,000. Those funds were directed to the Office of Travel and Tourism. There's been a number of conversations and email exchanges that I've had with our legislative delegation, principally Senator Tarr's office, about ensuring that these funds are expended for the purposes that were talked about. It's still a work in progress, but essentially what is planned is at this point, because the town of Wilmington, for the town to receive the money, we're not in a position to really be doing the work since it's on property owned and controlled by the MBTA. So the plan is that the funds that are under the travel and tourism are going to be transferred to the MBTA with the expectation that in addition to the platform that you'll recall was talked about some time ago, which the MBTA was planning to do as a matter of course with funds they already had available. In addition to that, they're going to be putting some lighting, pedestrian lighting in, 800 feet of fencing along the rail is part of the proposed plan, and also some paving that would connect the platform to the Middlesex Ave area. These plans are in place. One of the things that has not been identified to this point in their scope of work that I'm still pushing for is a call box. The indications I've gotten is that this is not something they typically do in their other stations, but that is something we're pursuing. Any questions? Otherwise, next is correspondence to the board with regard to expenditures for the senior center. I know the board had requested some time ago a status on where we stood with regard to the $30,000 grant. Certainly this is something that George Hooper and Terry Marciello have spent a significant amount of time on, both in terms of coordinating, identifying the work that would be done at the senior center. And I'm glad to say that the work has been completed. So the $30,000 has been expended. The last request for payment went in last week for a little over $7,000 for reimbursement. The work that was done, total costs $31,331, just shy of that. And the work essentially includes, as you can see here, replacing the stalls in the women's and men's room, changing the lighting out to LED lighting. In addition, the floor in the main hall has been refinished. Some painting has been done as well of the walls in the main meeting room. Clearly, this has been the kitchen area has been really the major focus, notwithstanding the other work that was done. But these are you can see on the left, the old cabinets, the existing cabinets, or what were the existing cabinets, and you'll note the so-called coffee station. All of that has been changed out. The next slide will show the work in progress here. We have our two carpenters that spent a significant amount of time on not only taking all the cabinets out, but also taking the flooring up, redoing the walls. And then you'll see the finished product here, installing these cabinets. To the right, the new coffee station is actually not only a countertop, but also includes some cabinet space, including a new vent there you see in the lower left slide. Again, the counter space, much better counter space than was previously the case, and the flooring is completely replaced with new tile. Some additional pictures of the kitchen. And then here's some before and after shots. Also, we have a new refrigerator that was purchased and has been put in place. There was some change out of outlets and again, there's some picture speaks 1,000 words in terms of the upgrade. Clearly, it's much brighter, much better situation there. So this is a reflection of the cost, as was noted, $31,330.94. And I would note that there was certainly a lot of work that was done there, and appreciate all the efforts of George and Terry and our carpenters. That work was done all in-house for our carpenters. But I also want to note that this is really to make the conditions at the Bazell Center improve those conditions on a temporary basis. You see, Terry definitely has a good opinion of things there, but this is clearly a temporary situation. It doesn't resolve the fact that this building is 1935 building, 8,000 square feet. Many of the communities in the area that have senior centers have upgraded them, have senior centers in the range of 14,000 to 28,000 square feet. The building, as you know, has many limitations in terms of space and the inability to accommodate various activities. So as much as we're very proud of this effort and it certainly took advantage of the money that was garnered by our legislative delegation, this is not at all to suggest that we don't need a new senior center. And this is where the senior center is going to be located when it is put forward. We're going to have it right on the water in Boston. Next item under correspondence.
I have a quick question through the chair to Mr. Hull.
Ira?
Yeah, regarding first compliments to the Department of Public Buildings for the renovations that were done at the senior center. They just look beautiful. They did such a great job. But I recall at the last town meeting, and I know this was something that Mr. Bendel and I had pushed for, was $10,000 budgeted for such renovations in addition to the $30,000 that our legislative delegation found, for a total of $40,000. So I was wondering what happened to that $10,000, because clearly probably a new bathroom floors could have been done with it. So there's about, you're saying it was over budget by $1,330, but it's really under budgeted by $8,600. So we going to use up that $10,000 that was appropriated for the senior center?
You'll recall that from a prior update, and George can speak to this specifically, the $10,000 that was directed to work at the senior center has already been expended, and I believe there were that included the change out of the air conditioning systems. George, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we did some additional upgrades throughout the facility. We also did the
Did he freeze up on us?
Yeah.
Give him a minute here. George, I think we lost you there. We'll give you another minute here.
Turn down your air conditioner, George.
main hardwood floor in the bingo. There was quite a bunch of work that strictly fan. Can you hear me now?
Hear you.
You got it? All right, good. Yeah, we did, before we did the $30,000, we did a bunch of other renovations, as you can remember, the bath.
We're in suspended animation here.
I guess, yeah.
The main bingo hall floor, we did a bunch of renovations.
I think, I don't want to speak for George, but it sounds like that the money was put into some other things that had been done prior to the kitchen being redone. That's
right. I agree with you, Mr. Chair. It's too bad that those additional renovations that were done by the buildings department wasn't included in this, because clearly it shows that there was new air conditioning, new heating put into this facility as well, in addition to all the other improvements that were made. So really, what was done speaks volumes in what you showed us tonight, but really goes beyond that, because you put in new AC units and heating
Absolutely.
units as well that into this facility. It looks just wonderful the way it is. So
Yeah, there's a lot of hard work that's involved in that.
so really that should be included in this presentation that you put together, George. You need more of a pat on the back. I would include that,
Well,
all that other work that you did before this.
Right, we were going, this is the grant money that was being applied. This didn't include the $10,000 that we were going for. This was the work that we did in-house for the 30,000.
Yeah.
And of course, you can see the bang we got for the buck. If you've done any renovation projects at all, you know that this paid for basically the material, the labor, and everything else that's involved. The Public Buildings Department put in place. So,
Yeah, absolutely, George. We can't thank you enough. A fantastic job by you and your department over there. So please extend our thanks to you to the men and women of your department.
All right, without any other questions on that, I'll move on to the next item under correspondence. Just a
well, thanks
letter
all for the residents, of course, of Wilmington. So,
just a letter of thanks was issued to DSM Coating Resins. They, to our surprise, one day we received a delivery of sanitizer. It was not solicited. It was just something that they had delivered to the town hall. So we certainly appreciate their efforts and their donation. Then under correspondence, we have some changes to the lineup for Xfinity. There's a number of different program changes, and they also discuss some changes to their programming platform. You can obtain that information if you go to infinity.com/support/contact-us. And this information goes out to their subscribers.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hall will move to board to consider.
First under board to consider is an intermunicipal agreement for housing services. For some members who have been on the board for a period of time, you'll recall this has come up in the past. The agreement, I believe, has been, or a version of it has been in place since 2014. The change this year is that the city of Woburn has expressed interest and is actually a party to this agreement. So where in the past there were 4 municipalities, including Wilmington, this going forward for the next 2 years, Woburn would be a participant as well, which ultimately reduces the town's share of the cost. And as you saw in the document, the town's cost in the first fiscal year 21 would be $17,550, and then the estimated cost in 22 would be a little over $18,000. Valerie, I think, is on the line in the event that there are any questions about the particular details as to what this grant is for, but she outlined that in her memo to the board.
And good evening, Valerie. If you can hear us, thank you for being with us. Our Director of Planning and Conservation is with us. Mr. Hull, just a brief question. In this agreement, will we still have the same point person Forgive me, I don't know, I can't recall the woman's name off the top of my head, but she's worked for the town, is that correct? For this region?
Yes, that's the same individual that we've had in the past.
And so she's the point person that we've had in the past for affordable housing. People who have questions on that can contact her. I know before this all started, the pandemic, we actually had some discussion amongst the board about having her have more on-site office hours in Wilmington. I know she had some office hours elsewhere, and I think there was a push by myself and others to try to get her to spend some more time in Wilmington. So certainly things have changed. We're on a remote Zoom call as we speak, so can't expect that to happen. But I want to make sure that residents of Wilmington know that this resource is available when they have questions about affordable housing.
Right, so Laura Stanton is the individual that we're speaking about. And Valerie, you want to speak to her accessibility and some of the things that she's been doing for us of late?
Sure, I can do that. So Laurie is available via, I guess the best way to get in touch with her is email. And you can find her email by going through our website it then directs you to the Town of Reading's website where her office is. Her email and phone number are on that website. Laurie helps us out with a lot of our paperwork for when folks want to refinance and they have an affordable unit, when they want to sell their affordable unit, folks looking to buy or rent affordable units. So she's a great resource in the day-to-day questions and paperwork that's involved with affordable units. Folks call her to see if they can make capital improvements in their home or their unit that will add to their sale price. So there's a lot of questions that are directed her way, and she's a great resource.
And I would just, go ahead, Valerie.
I anticipate that when we are back to normal, she would continue with the office hours. She said that those were very productive. She'd have people stopping in, both residents of town and some folks who weren't residents in town, sometimes looking to be residents or just looking for answers to questions.
Great. And we really encourage residents to take advantage of that. It's an awful lot of money to chip in. I hope residents are taking advantage of this great resource. So, if anybody would like to offer a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we enter into agreement with this contract. I'm glad that I looked at the fee structure and I recall, my memory's not that great, that we were paying an exorbitant amount, and it looks like it's more equitable in this new agreement. And I do recall, as Mr. Bendel did, we put on a hard push to get Laurie here for our residents before she wasn't, and now that she is, and that's great. That's a big plus. So put the motion forward.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Is there a second?
Second, Eaton, a second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We'll go by, is there any further discussion before we call for the vote? Hearing none, call for the vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And I am also a yes, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Valerie, thank you for being with us. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
So next under board to consider is accepting grants for 2020. You'll recall that there was a memo that was provided to the board at your previous meeting from Brian Perry, the finance director, and it outlined the funds that have been received from various departments during the course of 2020. As a matter of course, it is necessary for the board to formally accept these grants, and so I would be requesting that the board vote to do so.
Okay, is there a motion?
Second, Eaton will make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Also, okay, go ahead.
Mr. Eaton? Thank you, Mrs. O'Mahony. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And I'll make it unanimous. Thank you.
Next, under Board to Consider is a request of Jordan Capelio for installation of a stop sign at.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you might have skipped one accidentally. Jump back to number 8, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. The next one is submission of a letter to the Department of Revenue regarding our COVID-19 expenditures. So this is something that Brian Perry has provided to the board. He and I have had some discussions about this. He has spoken with his contact at the Department of Revenue, who the representatives at DOR are strongly advising all of their communities to take this action and request that their boards of selectmen authorize the funds that are being received through the CARES Act. So the essentially the rationale for doing this is that in the absence, as I understand it, in the absence of authorizing, in this case, the chair of the Board of Selectmen to accept these funds, the amount that is identified in this case for $540,862, that would be charged against the town's free cash pending reimbursement. So by taking this step that that I'm asking the board to take this evening, which is to send this letter to Mary Jane Hardy, Director of Accounts, while we have requests for reimbursement out there, that sum will not be charged against our free cash.
Okay, is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we have the chairman of the board accept these funds, but that the funds, though, Mr. Chair, go back to Wilmington, not, the, so that for the state of emergency, $540,862, that the chairman signed a letter to accept the funds on behalf of the town of Wilmington.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you,
Gary
Mr. De Palma. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And I'll make it unanimous. Thank you.
All right, so next is the request for a stop sign by Jordan Capelio for a stop sign at Mass Ave and Brattle Street. And this has been reviewed by Paul Aluni, who is our town engineer, and he is available if there are questions, but essentially, and I think there should be a overhead of the location that is in question here. Each time these kind of requests come up, one of the things that Paul does is to review the request against the standards that are established for use of signage on roadways. And I won't go into the full detail of what he wrote here, but essentially one of the elements that he focused on is that stop signs are not intended to serve as speed deterrents. They're really intended to serve as a control mechanism when you have conflicting travel ways. In this case, as you can see by the illustration, Mass Ave off of Main Street to the left continues down for a stretch and then bears to the left and then winds up out on Glen Road. So what he is suggesting, in rather than a stop sign at that spot, are signs representing a curve that would presumably communicate there needs to be caution exercised, and have those signs located at each side of the travelway. And with that, I'll turn it over to Paul if you have any other comments on your recommendation.
Thanks. Thank you, Town Manager Hall and members of the board. I don't, you summed it up perfectly. Essentially, Mass and Brattle, we did a complete evaluation in conjunction with Wilmington Police Department. It acts as a continuous way there. You know, we did recognize the relatively sharp horizontal curve. And also one other element there that's discussed in the memorandum is just that appendage on Mass Ave that serves 3 homes. And the MUTCD, which is, those are the rules that dictate where and why we put up stop signs. It's in accordance with Mass General Law. So for those small appendages, which we call like just minor streets approaching an intersection, the warrant is 6,000 vehicles per day on the main road and 3 crashes over the course of 1 year. And the report we got, we collected that data again with Wilmington Police Department. There was 1,500 cars per day, well below the 6,000, and 1 crash over 3 years, which I'm told was a minor crash. So it didn't meet the warrants. Happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Yeah, Mr. Hull, Mr. O'Looney, thank you for being with us. I guess the first question that comes to mind is, does your recommendation, has been relayed to the resident, and was he agreeable to it?
I have, oh, sorry. I have not relayed any communication to the resident.
Mr. Hall?
And I have not had any conversation with the resident at this point.
Okay.
Certainly happy to reach out if that's the wishes of the board to discuss our findings.
Okay. Does anybody want to offer a motion for the discussion here?
Yeah, Selectmen will make a motion that we, pursuant to town engineer's recommendation, that we install advanced warning signs, curb arrow signs, along both approaches of the intersection of Mass Ave and Brattle Street.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion. Selectman O'Mahony.
Thank you both. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I had a question for Mr. O'Looney, in looking at kind of the map, and I have to kind of make a full disclosure that I actually looked at a house in that neighborhood probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And one of the reasons why my husband and I decided it probably didn't make sense for us and our family was because it was on the corner of Brattle and Mass Ave. And just in the 45 minutes we were there looking at the house, we saw how the traffic was, and we didn't really want to have 4 kids and 2 dogs there, even if it did have a fenced-in yard. My question for you is Mass Ave and Brattle accepted ways or unaccepted ways? Not to poke a bear and not to bring up kind of.
Sure. I do believe they are accepted ways.
Because is there any mechanism in which, you know, I understand 1,400 cars a day isn't high traffic volume. But given that if you look at how many houses are on that neighborhood, there shouldn't be 1,400 cars passing through it every day, since there's only about 20 houses. So I'm concerned about the cut through aspect of it for those neighbors. And I understand the warning signs are a great first step, but I guess my ultimate question is there a way for us to evaluate whether it would make sense to have some type of sidewalk, so that people who are walking their dogs or children who are walking from, you know, their friend's house or something have a safer path to follow than having to walk in the street there?
Yeah, and we could look at the right-of-way availability and also, I mean, it's relatively flat through there. We just installed a drainage system within the last couple of years, so the street now drains properly. That's something that could be looked at if that's the wishes of the town manager.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at the right-of-way, you know, the extent that we have a right-of-way there to work with, and determine what the the cost would be for sidewalk in that location.
Question?
Thank you, Mrs. O'Mahony. Mr. De Palma?
Regarding Brattle, has there been a consideration of a yield sign instead of a slow sign? Brattle to Mass Ave?
Well, I guess so again, with the purpose of the sign, is there's no conflicting movement there, right? So it's really what I tried to get to the root of is what do we want to alert a driver to, and it's just it's that curve in the road.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bendel?
Mr. Kyra?
Yeah, Mr. Maloney, were they looking for just one stop sign or two? That's what
Two.
Two. And the first one they're looking for is over near House 12. Is that
we can pull
right
up.
on Mass Ave, number 12? I'm assuming a stop sign there.
Yeah, so exactly, Selectman Kyra, on both approaches from Mass and Brattle.
Where's the second stop sign that they're requesting? That's what I can't.
So one would be on Brattle Street in front of probably house number like 1. Yeah. And the second one would be then on Mass Ave as you approach the intersection to get to Brattle. Yep, right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Geez, I would hope that cars would naturally stop right at that number 12 before they entered onto Mass Ave.
Yeah, it's a slow, it's the radius there is about, it's a 50-foot radius at the center line. Doesn't require a complete stop, but it's definitely, you naturally reduce speed. And that was the other, again, the reason for the advanced curve warning.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now I would just add that as somebody who grew up on that area of town, not too far from there, that certainly I can attest to, having driven on that road a number of times. You can't count the amount of times people come around the corner pretty quickly. It is kind of narrow at that spot. People come around. So I think that a caution sign would be totally appropriate at this location as well. Okay, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. We'll call for the vote. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And I'll be also a yes. It's unanimous. Paul, thank you for being with us. And Mr. Hull, between the two of you, I hope we can relay this information, this explanation to the resident who made the request.
Yes, they will receive a correspondence to that effect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Next under board to consider is a request from Michael Shampoo, Chairman of the Economic Development Committee, to authorize use of public spaces. And you have an email from Mr. Shampoo. It just notes on discussion topic one discussion topic last night was around the use of Yentile open green area, Rotary Park, Swain Green, and the Common and Whitfield Park by local businesses during the pandemic. And then he talks about a yoga studio as an example of one type of business that is currently constrained in terms of their ability to operate, and is requesting that the board consider authorizing these types of businesses to set up in on town property.
Mr. Hall, I think Mr. Shampoo is joining us. He seems to pop up at a lot of these meetings lately. I don't know what's going on, but Mr. Shampoo, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Do you want to add something?
You know what? I'm going to stay black on the screen here just because I'm not in Selectmen attire. I hope that's all right with you, gentlemen and lady. First, Mr. De Palma, congratulations, and thank you for your volunteerism.
Thank you.
Mr. Bendel, thank you. And I'll be very, very brief. My only inclination, or the inclination, I should say, of the Economic Development Committee was simply in the same context or spirit of what you did at your Board of Selectmen meeting 2 weeks ago, to authorize the restaurants in town to create outdoor dining spaces, as well as offer those same restaurants the opportunity to do the outdoor liquor service, is to allow for some of the facilities or some of the private businesses in town currently restricted under the four-phased reopening approach by the Massachusetts state government. And I made the example of a yoga studio, but there's yoga studios, there are fitness centers, there are dance studios, and forgive me for, I'm sure there are others as well, but other facilities that currently can't conduct their business indoors where they normally would. And we are asking, the Economic Development Committee suggested that it would make sense, at least for the short term, to authorize those businesses to have meetings, to have events, or to conduct their business in small groups, adhering to all of the other social media requirements, social distancing requirements, but do so on town-owned property. So that was the rationale here, and I don't want to get overly formal with it, but it was just, I think that the process for them to do so today would be to submit a proposal to the Board of Selectmen, wait for the next Board of Selectmen meeting, have that proposal voted on at the next Board of Selectmen meeting. You know, time is of the essence. And so the rationalization here is to give, in hopes that the Board of Selectmen will give the town manager the authorization to grant those permits, or to grant the okay to those businesses until they are formally able to open their businesses under, I believe, phase 4, and bring their constituents back into their establishments. So that's the rationale here. I'm glad to stay on board and answer any questions, but I just wanted you to understand where our heads was at on this one.
Thank you, Mike. And if you don't mind hanging on just a moment, I mean, there may be a couple question or two. But first, before we do that, so we can entertain some discussion, I'm sure there is questions. Do we have a motion to open up the discussion?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the town manager to approve requests for the open spaces in town to be utilized by local businesses. And I would make that motion to be effective until November 1st, 2020, which would be consistent with what we've authorized the town manager to approve for the outdoor seating of restaurants, just for purposes of simplicity. If there's reason in the fall to extend or amend that time frame, then I think we probably should be taking those up at or around the same time, given whatever circumstances arise. But I would make that motion that we authorize Mr. Hull to be making these determinations without our specific approval until November 1st, 2020.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Discussion, Mr. Palmer, I saw your hand up.
Yes. What will the liability be to the town if anybody gets injured going through one of these classes? And is there a liability? Are we liable for any type of injury that would happen on a private business conducting their business on town property?
Mr. Hull?
I suspect there would be some measure of liability. I don't know, to what degree, the degree of liability, but yes, I would expect that there would be some measure of liability. You'll see in the next request here, board to consider, one of the things that was discussed or will be discussed in this next one is the prospect of putting up staging for a dance studio. One of the things that I noted in that particular case in my communication with Nancy Valley is some measure of concern about liability if you were allowing a private group to set up staging and someone happens to fall off the staging. We would presumably in that particular case look for a certificate of insurance naming the town as an additional insured. to the extent that people are out on a public space, engaged in yoga or some other activity like that, I suspect the liability is relatively modest.
Yeah, and I think I had the same concern as Selectman DePalma. I think what I was going to suggest or ask is if we could just ask town council if it's sufficient. I mean, most of these private entities that are doing kind of health and fitness type activities have their clients sign waivers. And my expectation would be at a minimum that the town of Wilmington wouldn't be included in any waiver that they'd be signing. My second concern, kind of looking at the next request, is making sure that we're consistent in the number of the capacity concerns that we have. I think it's a lot different to be requesting dance classes throughout the summer versus a recital in which you're basically inviting a large group of people to participate. I would have concerns about that type of event being held on town property at this point, given how much work we've had to put into something like a town meeting, to then have it be, hundreds of students dancing for, their families. I'm a little bit concerned about extending it to that level. I do understand that, open space, outdoor open space is what a lot of businesses are looking for right now to kind of address these concerns. So I am comfortable giving the town manager kind of the authority to review the requests, with the understanding that you'd be following the Board of Health's recommendations as to what those gatherings should look like at this point in whatever phase we're in at the time the request is made. I would also suggest that those reviews, I understand the motion says that you have that authority till November 1st. But I would also suggest strongly that when permission is given, it's with a limited time frame, because the other concern I would have is there are a lot of dance studios in town. There are a lot of fitness studios in town, and I wouldn't want kind of one business suffering because another business was first to you to get permission to do something, and therefore there wasn't space available for all the businesses in Wilmington to have the same opportunity. So I would suggest some type of restriction as to how frequently, because one dance studio could run 50 hours a week of classes, and that would obviously eliminate that space for another business to have it available to them. So those are my concerns. I ultimately think we should be making this available to the businesses to help support them being able to generate revenue and do the work that they want to be doing. I would just want to make sure that we're as fair as we can be, and that we're also following the Board of Health's guidelines and recommendations.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I could just, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was hoping that before you would grant permission, legal would be contacted to see what liabilities you have, and if we have to have waivers signed by the companies themselves. So we're not taking a chance of the town being sued for anything if there was an accident there, an injury. That's my concern, is the liability to the town for anything. We need a waiver sign, maybe.
Thank you. Mr. Hull, did you want to respond to those?
I was just going to offer a couple of comments. First of all, with respect to the town common, based upon the Board of Selectmen's there's a procedures policies document that the board has, and there's a reference in there, and I'm reading from it specifically: use of the town common should be restricted to Wilmington nonprofit groups, organizations, and individuals, as well as town-sponsored events. So specifically for the town common, there is a policy apparently that was established many, many years ago that places that restriction. That's not to say that the board could not grant a waiver of that for a defined period, as sounds like is being suggested here. With respect to Rotary Park, there is no such language. I would also note that the other areas, Yentile, the green space there, there has not been any requirement for permitting of that space. In fact, during the course of the conversations about the Yentile development, I think the committee consensus was to maintain that as an open space for people to come at their own will without permission. But certainly, again, if the board is so inclined, we can, at least on a temporary basis, allow that on a permitted basis. I guess one of the things I would suggest that the board be clear on is whether this permission is for exclusive use or for simply use. There are instances, for example, when the board has granted permission for someone to have a wedding event on the Rotary Park with the understanding that other people may be there to be walking and so on, and that it's not an exclusive. So that's something to consider. And I would also just note that the some of the areas, Glen Road, Fields, April Field, Whitfield, the Whitfield area are permits are granted by the recreation director in those cases. So, and then finally, because this is referenced in the correspondence that we'll be talking about next, any of the spaces that adjoin schools are under the jurisdiction of the school department of the superintendent of schools. So to the extent people may be looking for space there, they would need to consult with the school superintendent.
Any further discussion, questions for Mr. Shampoo? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Eaton?
Yeah, Mr. Shampoo, if you don't mind, I see that you're muted, so I'll wait. Thank you, Mr. Shampoo. What effect, if any, do you think the requirement of, and maybe this question is too general to get a yes or no answer, but is requiring certain businesses that want to utilize their open spaces for their business purposes, requiring them to get provide documentation that naming the town as an additional insured, would that serve as a bar to those businesses pursuing that further?
Well, thank you, Mr. Eaton. I really don't know the answer to be completely 100% honest with you, but I would suggest to you that I completely concur with Mr. De Palma's preponderance of caution approach, and I would share it. So whatever the board deems an appropriate level of caution to implement, certainly I would agree with and support. If a dance studio is able to, through their insurance agent, acquire the necessary whatever documentation that says that the town is the additional insured, I think those are typically pretty quick things to get produced. Yeah. And under the circumstances, I think most organizations and companies are prepared to act quickly under the circumstances. So long answer to your good question, which is, I don't think that that's a barrier. And if it is a barrier, then frankly, maybe we don't necessarily want to have that business on one of our public lands. So yeah, no, I think we need to protect the town. We need to protect the town's people. It's an appropriate level of security. But if there's a way to protect the town's interest, and open up some of these facilities for these businesses to get back to profit, that checks off a lot of boxes and answers a lot of problems.
Thank you, Mr. Shampoo.
Mr. Chair.
Takara?
Yeah, I would love to see these businesses reopen and get back on their feet again for sure. And if there's something that we can do to help them, I would be supportive of that. But I do agree with my colleagues that liability plays a factor. I know that the farmers market, they sign an insurance or they have a liability clause in there when they when they go out and do their things, when we allow permission for that. I think WCTV runs a Wilmington Pride event at Yentile. I don't know if they get permission for that through the board, I believe. But I guess I would have to also reference Shelley Newhouse, the Board of Health, to see what the guidelines are from the state. I know that you're aware that the Board of Selectmen voted to allow the restaurants to have open seating, and that was because it came down from the state guidelines in their phase two aspect. Now, does the state guidelines allow for dance studios, physical fitness centers, and like to go outdoors the way they're allowed restaurants, or are they just under phase 4 and the state's not even contemplating that? So I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I think this is a good step, but I just think that there are a lot of questions that need to be answered first.
And if I may just add my 2 cents here, I would be inclined to support this request with the encouragement that it sounds like I'm getting from others, that the town manager thoroughly vet each one of these. If the person is taking proper precautions to make sure that their insurance is in order and that the waivers are being signed, Shelley Newhouse has a positive recommendation, then I would feel comfortable. If those things weren't able to be met, I would hope that it would be the decision of the manager and his staff to decline such a request.
And could I just add, Mr. Chair, also which businesses do we allow and we don't allow? I mean, we want all the businesses to open up as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. But do we allow a consignment shop to open up its business outside on public property? Where do we allow businesses to? Which ones do we allow? Is it just the physical fitness groups, or is it any business that we see fit? So that's another question I think we'd have to address.
Mr. Shampoo, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I don't know if, it's a great question, Mr. Carr. Ultimately, I don't think that the Economic Development Committee, and certainly not I, am asking for a change in how I'm trying to think of how to say this. All we're looking to do is give the town manager, under these tremendously special circumstances, the opportunity to grant permission that would otherwise be granted by the Board of Selectmen after a request was submitted, brought to a Board of Selectmen meeting, discussed and deliberated on and voted on at a Board of Selectmen meeting. So, I mean, because of your schedule, that would delay a request for up to 2 to 3 weeks. So I think the notion is just in the same way that the authorization to the town manager with consultation from all the appropriate parties, Shelley and the board of the building department and others, the town manager is able to grant permission to restaurants for outdoor dining and otherwise. The request is the same here for other businesses, and it's a very large umbrella, and I admit that, Mr. Kyra, but I would just simply say, under the remarkably unusual circumstances, the request here is for the Board of Selectmen to authorize the town manager to sort of make a judgment call. And I know that's a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure on you, Mr. Hall. But it gets those businesses into a position to be able to start to generate revenue sooner than waiting for another 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the circumstances. If it's a fool's errand, and if it doesn't make sense, and if there's too many questions, certainly I get it. The way I look at it is, let's at least try to help these businesses. But if in trying to help these businesses, it puts the town at risk, then we should forego it. But if there's a way to do to help these businesses without putting the town people at risk, I'd love to see us take a swing at it. That's really it. And I'm sorry I don't have more detail. We're trying to gather information as we go along here, but we're moving at breakneck speed with limited information. So I regret that you have limited information, because so do we.
And I don't want to speak for you, but Mr. Shampoo, but your request is with the understanding that perhaps any or all could be denied by the town manager, right? But you're,
of course, yeah. It's not a carte blanche kind of mentality here. Agreed.
Can I request that the motion be read back again? I just want to hear what the wording was initially that Selectman Eaton had made.
Well, you would do that because I meandered on for a while. My motion was that we authorize the town manager to have the authority to approve requests for businesses to utilize open spaces between now and November 1, 2020. If I can elaborate just a little bit based on what we're saying, and I don't mean to cut you off, Ms. O'Malley, so forgive me if I am, but what I have in mind in this is we're scheduled to meet on July 13th and then again on August 17th, and then the next time will be in September. And to be honest, who knows where we're going to be on each of those dates. And I think each business that might be interested in doing this would be evaluated on its own merits and its own intentions as to what they wanted to do to utilize the open space that we have. And I think each business would have a different plan and a different set of risks, and who knows what the landscape is going to be in just a couple of weeks. And I would hate to have our schedule impact whether or not a local business was able to keep up with the changing consumer demand of safety to have goods or services delivered in a safe manner. And if we have open space that can be utilized to help out the small businesses in town, understanding that in Mr. Shampoo's words, that's a very large umbrella. I think that we should be trusting the town manager and the department heads to be evaluating each request on its own merits.
I was just asking because I think maybe to make the umbrella a little smaller, maybe like from a beach umbrella to a golf umbrella, we could, instead of saying just business, maybe we could say personal service, like service business and not retail. So it wouldn't be for the sale of goods, that we would be authorizing the town manager to evaluate businesses that are offering services to people. And that way we don't have, I think it might've been Selectman Kyra who was saying, how do we stop someone from just doing a pop-up shop with a bunch of goods, on the town common? Maybe if we could limit the language so that we were giving the town manager the authority to use his discretion with the advice and guidance of town council and the Board of Health for businesses that offer services in our town to individuals rather than all businesses. I don't know if that alleviates some of the concern that we might be having.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I fear that we might be wandering a little bit outside of our scope of expertise. I think the Board of Health is really the ones that should be making that call and not this board.
I would agree. Any other questions or comments here? We do have a motion. We do have a second. We're under discussion. Certainly a lot to chew.
Mr. Chair, can I make an amendment to the motion? I'm still not, the motion is to allow businesses, right? The opportunity with the permission of the town manager. So I think everybody was concerned about the liability portion. So if we can make an amendment to the motion to include that the town manager will investigate the liability to the town, and also allowing the Board of Health to weigh in on the determination of the business, and to exclude the town common from this. I don't think that we need businesses on the town common. We have a veterans memorial on the town common. I think we should just stay away from that area and keep it to the other open areas.
Mr. Eaton, are you willing to amend your motion?
Yes.
Good, because I have a proposed amendment as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could just raise one question with regard to the reference to allowing the Board of Health to participate in the determination. I'm wondering if it would be more appropriate in terms of certainly timeliness, as rather than going to the Board of Health, it would perhaps be the health director. So
Yes.
certainly I would want to consult with Shelley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Howell. I appreciate that. Yep.
And Mr. Eaton, I agree with the spirit of your motion and the amendment made by Mr. Kyra. My hesitation is, and I understand why you offered up November date to be consistent with the restaurants, but it has me a little concerned with that length of time. And I know I say this having remembered that you mentioned we could revisit this at a number of upcoming meetings. I would tend to feel a little more comfortable if we said through phase 3 or through the end of phase 3, where it could be revisited by this board. Just to throw it out there, I'd hate to get people's hopes up, right? What if a business said, okay, great, we've got a lot of time to get our stuff together and prepare a nice case to be made in front of the town manager and his staff. Come to find out, things change. So just my personal opinion, I'd love to see the amendment, an amendment made where the date was changed, the end date, but that's just one opinion.
While I consider that, let me just do a quick Google search to find out when we're looking at that.
Well, I think if we think back to the beginning of this meeting, Kelly Newhouse indicated that perhaps phase 3, the hope would be that phase 3 will begin July 6th.
Yeah.
And we know that these businesses hopefully will be able to open completely in phase 4. And at the rate we're moving, and we can only go based on what we've seen, that each phase and each step is a couple of weeks. That if I just had to take an educated guess, it would be looking at phase 4 sometime around the month of August. So does it make more sense to for this board to support something that would put it into phase 4 instead of going all the way out to November?
So just a point of clarification, what happens if we go forward a phase and then backwards?
And then I think all bets would be off, right? I mean, if things get worse and the pandemic worsens, in which we hope it doesn't, but it is a reality that things certainly, and some are saying it could happen, then certainly all bets would be off, and we'd be revisiting much more than just this.
So would you consider perhaps our first September meeting as a deadline instead, to kind of get us through July and August, where we only have one meeting? And
in my mind, I felt more comfortable saying, something through the summer.
Okay.
Again, I understand the rationale of the November staying consistent with the restaurants, but again, to Mr. Kyra's point, that those guidelines were brought down by the state, and we supported them. So we have an ongoing discussion.
I think, Mr. Chair, to your point, it's from a scheduling perspective, if there are businesses that are looking to perhaps schedule out into the fall, October, late September, whatever, and then circumstances change for the worse, it would be, I think, to your point, better to have it through a shorter timeline and revisit it and be able to extend it rather than having to dial back, so to speak, where people or businesses are expecting they're going to be able to do something in a particular place through November 1st, and then find out that they're going to have to, that plan is not going to work.
Okay, so would that be, is your suggestion, as I understand it, Mr. Hall, that this be through maybe August 17th, that meeting, and then we have that on the agenda to consider whether or not to extend it further?
I mean, it's certainly, that would be the meeting to consider it. If you were to go to September 1st with the premise that you're your closest meeting to that date is in August, and then in your meeting in August, based upon what we know at that point, if it appears that things are stable and we're continuing to improve, then but we're still within a state of emergency, then perhaps that deadline, that timeline could be extended out to a later date.
And I would, again, would feel more comfortable supporting this, knowing that a business could come to the town manager and say, listen, this is what we have planned for the next 6 weeks. This is what we'd like to attempt to do. What do you think? Yes or no after you reviewed it. I just think it's a little more reasonable for somebody to present a detailed plan of exactly where and when and what they want to do. The shorter window.
All right, so Mr. Bendel, just I guess a point of clarification, what is your amendment to the amendment motion?
I guess just to wrap it up here, I'd like to see it go to our August meeting to be revisited then.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that.
And Mr. Chair, and at any time that the town manager deems fit, or the Board of Selectmen, these businesses can be stopped. If all of a sudden there's something crazy happens and things break out, I don't want them to think that they're staying on because we said you can stay on until August 17th. If we have to stop them in July, they'll have to have the understanding that we stopped them. Is that correct?
I guess yeah, I agree with you. I'm trying to be optimistic here that, August 17th will bring phase 4 and these businesses will be opened and this conversation will be moot, but we'll see.
Right.
Mr. Eaton, if you don't mind, one last time, just so everybody's clear on what they'll be voting on.
Well, that's fantastic. How much time you have, Mr. Bendel? All right, so I have moved that we authorize the town manager to authorize use of open space within the town for local businesses for business purposes. And I had originally done it with a November 1, 2020 end date. That had been amended by Mr. Kyra to allow the town manager to consult with the health director and also to have the town manager consider and implement any appropriate liability considerations. And was further amended by Mr. Bendel to have it run through August 17, 2020, with the understanding that if any event seems to be running afoul of what was presented to the town or is not operating as was presented, then the town can revoke whatever permission or license or permission to use the open space.
Is it the intent to restrict the town common?
Yes,
correct.
that was-
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
I got like 90% of it.
That was good.
I bet if we asked you to do it again, you'd get it perfect, but I'm just going to.
If you ask me to do it again, I'm suddenly going to have router issues and lockout.
I'm sure Beverly has it all down, so no worries.
Ms. Dalton, you can call me later if you want.
All right. So I'm going to call for the vote here in just a second, but however, regardless of how the vote goes, I hope that people at home recognize that I think I can speak for everybody, that everyone's extremely supportive of trying to help these businesses out, that we just want to make sure that we're taking every precaution to keep the town safe. And that's what I heard a lot of here this evening. So with that, I'll call for the vote on the motion that's been made by Mr. Eaton, seconded by Mrs. O'Mahony, and amended by almost all of us. Mr. Kyra.
Yes.
Mr. De Palma.
Yes.
Mr. Eaton.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony.
Yes.
Mr. Bendel is also a yes. Shampoo, congratulations.
Yeah, it's not congratulations to me, but thank you all very much. Listen, I hope that this measure you've taken tonight is completely moot. We all hope for the quick, rapid, and safe reopening of all of our businesses. The way I view this was it's just a contingency plan to allow for these businesses to have another option available to them. Thank you all very much for your vision and for your support, and we'll continue marching forward. Have a great evening.
And thank you, Mike. Do you want to stick on the line for the do you have a piece in this next one? No, this is a.
I don't really. It's something I've been privy to in terms of the communications, but I'm not involved in the communications. So I will let you flush this one out on your own.
Okay, Mr. Shampoo, thank you very much. Thanks to you and your committee, and have a nice night.
Good evening.
Okay, Mr. Hohen, just to finalize that, I know that you'll correspond with the board as frequently as you can on updates on, are we getting a lot of these, a flurry of applications? Are we getting none? And perhaps you could update us at a July meeting to let the board know. But if anything major happens from now until then, I know you'll reach out to the board members, I hope.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you very much. Now, final board to consider?
This next one is specifically a request, although, and there was information that came to me on Saturday via Nancy Valley. And it was actually directed to the Board of Selectmen. I'll just read it into the record. My name is Laura Osgood, and I'm the owner of Wilmington Dance Academy. As a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I have been communicating with Nancy Valley. I'm looking to use a field in Wilmington for outside dance classes starting July 6th and possibly running through August 28th. I have many families that are still not comfortable with getting into my dance studio, but would love to work outside. I will be running small in-studio classes following all protocols from the government starting July 6th, but have an outside option. But having an outside option for families would be great too. I was thinking of a school field or Yentile Farms. I know there is a hidden field out behind the West Intermediate. I would be open to any field that you think would be allowed. I'm also looking to have an outside recital and renting a stage or a dance floor. Nancy told me in our last email that she brought up an idea to the town government, and they seemed interested in the idea of having a recital in August at Yentile Farms. The other idea I recently thought about was student high school parking lot. I am not quite sure of a date yet, thinking possibly a Sunday, late afternoon, early evening, either 7/24, 8/1, 8/8. I can be flexible with the date and could do during the week in the early evening as well. I have reached out to Wooden Kiwi Productions, Inc., who rent dance stages for outside events. They are in the process of sending me a quote. Please let me know if there are any options here. Small businesses have taken such a hit, as you know. Annual recitals are a huge part of a successful dance studio. Students work hard all year to show that what they have accomplished and to look forward to their recital days. Thank you so much for your consideration. I look forward to hearing back from you. I would just note, I guess for the record, I'm a little surprised at the comment about the town being receptive to an event at the Yentile Field. Yentile Farms, rather. I don't recall, at least in my participation in the Economic Development Committee meeting, that there was any indication that we would be inviting a recital at the Yentile Farm, but that is the request.
Mr. Hall, I think a lot of this, correct me if I'm wrong here, a lot of this was kind of taken up in our last decision.
Right, and that's right.
The individual request, and some of it seems reasonable. Others I'd have follow-up questions about. But it seems like to me, from my perspective, that this is something that, as the board just voted, you and your team would have to take a look at.
I would agree.
As would I.
Does anybody else want to have some discussion on this? Make a motion to pass over it? I'm open to anything.
I would move to pass over it since it basically falls squarely into the category we just authorized the town manager to deal with without our need to be involved or to hold up the process.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yeah. Right.
We got a second there we got one from each, so that counts as two. Second, okay, and discussion?
Just that, Mr. Hall, if you could just continue the dialogue so that if anybody's watching at home, I think they're probably the heads might be spinning a little bit over the discussion that we just had. So it might be worth reaching out directly to say, look, let's talk what you want, and we can talk options from there and see if there's a middle ground that makes sense for them.
Yeah, the other thing I only think of when you talked about having a recital at night, I wonder if the committee would be more inclined to go during the daylight hours rather than at night. You think of the mosquitoes nowadays and the issues that come with that. I don't know.
Well, Mr. Hull, it doesn't sound like you have to wait very long to consider your first request. So
Right.
I would agree that we would take no action here, but certainly look forward to your team thoroughly reviewing Ms. Osgood's request and certainly getting back to her as soon as you could. Yeah, if I would just, and then we'll call for the vote here just a second, but I would say that perhaps you could follow up with a call or an email to her tomorrow saying that the board has decided you will take up the request and that you'll get back to her with your decision.
Will do.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to take no action here. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Okay, that brings us to public comment. Mr. O'Neill, do we have any public comments? Callers on the line?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll just give them a minute. Again, the phone number is on the screen, 1-646-558-8656 with the ID number on the screen in a couple different locations. Feel free to call in with your public comment. And if it's Mike Shampoo, he already had a chance, so. All right, John, anybody calling in?
No, sir.
Okay, if there's no objection, we'll move on. Hearing none, we'll move to announcements. Mr. Kyra?
Yeah, I just want to congratulate Selectman O'Mahony and Selectman De Palma on their victories over the weekend, and also I believe Steve Bjork and Jen Bryson and Audrey Reed also were elected to positions, and congratulations to all of them. I would like to bring up in the spirit of what the Sons of Italy has been doing. Lately, they've been having appreciation luncheons for various first responders. And this past Friday, they had an appreciation luncheon at DPW. And along with that, DPW was recognized, and Mr. Hull can correct me, was recognized nationally as a first responder, and they received a first responder flag for their recognition. As Jamie McGaldy said, they're the silent arm of public safety here in Wilmington. They certainly are, and well deserving of this recognition. One of the first communities in Massachusetts to receive it. So congratulations to them.
Absolutely. Congratulations to them, and thank you to the Sons of Italy for all the work they do. Mr. De Palma?
I'd like to give a shout out to all town employees. We hear from fire and police all the time. We don't hear from DPW or any of the other agencies. During this pandemic, they've been just as important. They've been out there doing their jobs, and I just like to give a shout out to them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Eaton?
Yeah, I'll echo Selectman Kyra's congratulations to Selectman O'Mahony for your re-election, and to Selectman De Palma for your election to the board. I know you had to kind of wait in the wings for a while, but congratulations, and a thank you to the town clerk's office and the election workers that put in a long day on Saturday to make sure that that election went off and was done safely. It was nice to hear Ms. Coburn-Dion's kind of rundown of how our departments have been adapting and handling the last 3.5 months, more or less, as we've all had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And so, yeah, it's very much appreciated all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes from all our town employees. It's very much appreciated by this board. So keep it up. I think we're doing well, but now it's an endurance challenge. You gotta really just continue to follow the public health professionals. I think Ms. Newhouse's job has been, I can't imagine the hours that she's been putting in, but I think we're very grateful to have her. So I look forward to hopefully more good news in the near future.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Sure. So thank you all for the congratulations. And I just wanted to welcome Selectman DePalma officially to the board. I know it's a lot different looking at us all in squares than it will be sitting in room 9, hopefully someday soon. I want to thank everyone who voted on Saturday and who worked the polls on Saturday. And most importantly, I had said somewhere along the way in these last, few weeks or months that this has been kind of the most unique volunteer position I've ever held in this town. And I appreciate having it for another 3 years, but I also, I never ask more than I'm willing to give. So I again say, I hope to see a lot of familiar faces at town meeting this Saturday. Be safe doing it. Obviously don't compromise yourself or your own situation, but we owe it, every person owes it to the town to give their time a little bit. And I think this is a great example of a way to support the town and to make sure you're holding us all accountable. Thanks.
Thank you. And obviously, congratulations to both of you again. We look forward to working with you. And I echo all the comments that have already been made. I do want to add 2 more quick things. We won't meet again until after the 4th of July. I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. And I want to, I can't help but note that every time I look at the flag, I'm reminded that freedom didn't come free. So I want to thank all of our veterans and active military personnel who have provided us with this great freedom that we'll be celebrating on the 4th of July. In a little bit different of fashion this year. We won't be gathering in large groups at the Common like we normally do with the great organizations and the great food and music and great opportunity to interact with our public safety, police and fire, but hopefully everyone can find a safe way to enjoy the time with their family. And I wish you all a very safe 4th of July. And lastly, I just want to say here this evening, I think it's a really timely announcement that I want to give a huge shout out to the Wilmington Police Department. I want to thank them for their professionalism, the respect that they show our residents, the respect that they have from our residents, the compassion that they've shown our residents. And I want to say that I stand in full support of Chief Desmond and all the men and women of the Wilmington Police Department. I think they're the finest police department in all the land. So I thank them for everything they do on a daily basis. Okay. Any new business, Mr. Kyra?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
And Mr. De Palma?
I'm good.
Mr. Eaton?
Oh.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
No, sir.
And I have none. And we'll move to important dates. Mr. Hull?
Actually, if I could, just before we get to important dates, so on Friday, I received a call from Melanie Morash, who is the EPA specialist assigned to the Olin project, and she indicated that the EPA is planning to issue their decision with regard to the path forward on remediation, planning to issue that decision on August 10th. Obviously, I wasn't able to, because of the timeline and when that conversation took place, wasn't able to get that on the agenda. So this is just as a information piece, but there are dates that are proposed for an informal session. All these sessions will be virtual sessions. The first being a session to explain to the public what their proposal is, and then to solicit some feedback, and then a more formal public, more formally hearing that would be scheduled later, specifically for people to offer comment. There will be no back and forth dialogue. People will simply offer comment that will be recorded for the record. So one of the things that I'll be doing here in the next few days is based upon conversations with the appropriate department heads and Geo Insight, looking at whether the dates that are proposed for these meetings make sense, or whether we should be looking to push them back a bit. I can only imagine the scope and scale of this decision is going to be, require a fair amount of time to digest.
Thank you for that update.
With regard to important dates, we have now through October 11th, the Farmers Market, Town Common, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. June 27th, as has been noted, the high school softball field for our annual town meeting starting at 9 a.m. July 8th is a brush drop off Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again on the 11th, July 11th, brush drop off 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Next Selectmen's meeting, July 13th, Town Hall virtual, 7 p.m.
Great. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing everyone at town meeting this coming Saturday, 9 a.m. At the high school softball field. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I can make that motion.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Kyra. Motion's been made in second. Mr. Kyra?
Yes.
Mr. De Palma?
Yes.
Mr. Eaton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Mahony?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel's a yes. That's unanimous. Good night, everyone, and thank you.
Good night.